if the audio is not so clear or good tonight, it's because we're using the microphone right off the Logitech uh, webcam, which strangely, I had a bunch of other mics around here, is the best to my ears. I don't know, best sounding mics. Uh, of all of these other junky kind of mics that I still had here that I tried to set up earlier. So I apologize. I'm going to try to project my voice. Let me know if you can't hear me. I will. I didn't want to cancel the show and wait until the weekend, so here we are. Okay, so some shout outs. We have Kel Truth 77 in a live chat. Reamsey is here. Jonaside is here. Unidentified object is here. And Lee Veltman is here. Robin Eaglesong I see as well. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. And I see a new person in the live chat. I do not believe that I have seen you here before. Unidentified object, who says, I wanted it to be real also. I heard about it 1.5 plus years ago. Problem is, it looks like he was maybe MK Ultra. See Valet's revelations. It could have been an op. Passed lie detectors. Unidentified object. I'm glad you mentioned that he passed lie detectors because we're going to be covering the fake story that he didn't pass lie detector tests, at least not a real one, administered by an independent polygraph expert that did not have a pre-existing relationship with George Knapp. The person who administered those lie detectors was a close friend of George Knapp. And the lie detector tests were administered right after Stanton Friedman blew Bob Lazar's educational credentials to total shit. It's my belief that they needed something to bolster the story, so along came these claims of Bob Lazar passing lie detector tests, and we're going to get into that. And again, looking for comments in the live chat. Looks like everybody is greeting each other. Kel Truth says, I'm looking forward to hearing the evidence you have that makes it a fabrication. Good, and I hope that you will keep an open mind. Reamsey says, I heard about the Bob Lazar years ago from TV interviews. I have always believed the story, even though it is a lie. I will always believe whatever Bob makes up. Reamsey, we've been through this before, right? I know how you feel. And I once felt exactly the same way that you do. I didn't care. Nobody could tell me otherwise. Bob Lazar's telling the truth about those alien spacecraft, bro. So yeah, I wanted to give it just a little bit of time, but we do have a lot, just so that more people funnel into the live chat. We'll give it a few more minutes, and then I have a treasure trove of things to show you tonight. Again, I've been looking into this case for years and years and years. Identified objects as well. Nice. Thanks, Stephen. I did not know that. Yeah, and there's even more problems with the lie detector test claims, and we are going to unpack some of that and provide the evidence that the lie detector claims are complete and total fake. You'll see, friends. Okay, Dan Hogan says, George Knapp always acts like he's such a journalist. He seems like a nice guy, but he's been milking this story for years. Dan Hogan, I'm going to read some correspondences, a letter, between George Knapp and I. And here's what I'm going to say. I have zero respect for intellectual weakling, idiot, Jeremy Corbell. I have no respect for that guy because his go-to move is to just block everybody from social media that asks him any real questions or has real evidence. He cannot withstand debate. His so-called evidence, Bob Lazar is a true story, is so weak that he cannot withstand debate. So what does he do? He blocks everyone. Go talk to Jeremy Corbell on social media. Show him evidence that Bob Lazar is lying in one of his threads. He can't have his followers seeing that. So he deletes your comment and erases you from his existence. You can't post anything anymore. And that's weak. But to his credit, I give George Knapp a little more credit because George Knapp and I have been back and forth in messages, and he knows that I disagree with him, and he's okay with that. I mean, he got a little testy a few times with me. And the attitude that I sense from him is like, look, I'm a journalist, kid. I've been doing this for 40 years, and you're just starting out. So trust me, I know what I'm doing. You don't. That I had a little bit of a problem with, but like I said, George Knapp will engage. He will debate. He will allow people to show him evidence, ask him questions, and he's got to be a busy guy, right? He's got no reason really to talk to me, but he did, and he does, I guess. If I continue, maybe, I don't know. We haven't talked. I haven't sent him a message in quite some time. I'm getting way off track here. My point is, at least George Knapp will answer questions to other investigators, other people looking into the story. He's not blocking people on social media. Oh, and that's another point. Copyright strikes. That's another Jeremy Corbell play. You can't take a little 2-minute clip from his film and then make your own video saying this is complete and total bullshit and here's why. Jeremy Corbell will copyright strike you and get that taken down. Again, because he's an intellectual weakling whose so-called evidence that this case is real is so flimsy, so weak, so easy to shatter that he cannot withstand any debate. So he's going to pull your videos down. You cannot use anything from any of his films, or they get taken down because he can't withstand any debate. And he can't afford to let his followers see some of this evidence like we're going to show tonight. Thankfully, like I keep saying this, George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, Richard Dolan, they all help each other out selling this crap. It's a big club and I ain't in it. So I can say whatever I want. I have no reason, financial or otherwise, to say anything about this case except what I believe to be true. And that's what we're going to do tonight. There's no ads on the show here. This video is not monetized. I make nothing from telling people the truth. Now, the flip side of the coin is that many people make tons of money selling people lies. And we all have to choose, or we all have to decide for ourselves who's the more credible person. The person that's not making a dime, or the person that has a financial motive to continue selling bullshit and fairy tales. And that's where we're at, friends. Let me see another comment. Yeah, Lee Veltman makes a good comment. I love that the Bob Lazar, Corey Goode, and Nick Redfern's narratives all contradict each other. Yeah. Unidentified object, UFO video taken down by Rogan's people the other day. I believe it's back up. Yes, and that's another thing. Somebody made a video. There was somebody who made a video showing that Bob Lazar said on Joe Rogan, we have no idea how this craft works. And then they flipped to his original video that he used to sell for $29.95 in the back of science magazines, where he's explaining exactly how it works. These are the sort of contradictions that we get. So friends, we're going to jump right into the presentation here because I think it's important that I first show you an incredible source of information proving that the Bob Lazar story is all fabricated nonsense. And I found this quite some time ago, and it is from Jeremy Rise, alienscientist.com, who has been looking into this story for even much longer than I have. So if you want to really get an education in the Bob Lazar case, just go to alienscientist.com. I didn't talk to him that I'm going to show this, but I think it's a public website. I don't think he would mind. Shout out to Jeremy Rise, Alien Scientist. And here's what I have to say about Jeremy Rise as a trustable source. Again, Jeremy Rise isn't doing this for money. And Jeremy Rise has a real physics degree. He has an actual degree. If you ask him to show it to you, he will. If you call the school that's where his degree is from and verify that he got that physics degree, he did. I trust him as a source. He's been looking into this story forever, sometimes with a specific interest in Bob's so-called science, which is science fiction. This is another proof, friends, that Bob Lazar can't be trusted, because anytime a real science guy or scientist, person with a real physics degree, looks into Bob's so-called science, they all say the same thing. This is bullshit. There's no way this could work, just based on many different things. We're going to get into that. But anyway, you go to alienscientist.com, you go to the debunk been. He's debunked a lot of these frauds and fakes. Here we have Dan Burish, Billy Meyer, Stan Romanek, Free Energy, Dr. Judy Wood, and of course, first on his list, because I think this is the one that interests him the most, he's covered it a lot, is Bob Lazar. And what we get is a point by point destruction of the mythology surrounding Bob Lazar. Everything from where he claims he was hired from, for example, Kirk Meyer Corporation is who he actually worked for. He was a subcontractor at Los Alamos. One of the problems with Bob Lazar's story is that Kirk Meyer Corporation did not hire physicists, especially not senior staff level physicists. They hired electronics technicians. And here, Jeremy Rice, through excellent research, has found the ad for electronic technicians that was placed in the area around that time. There are several credible sources that claim, and I have one of my own that works at Los Alamos today, that claim that Bob Lazar did work at Los Alamos, but he was never a physicist. He was an electronics tech, tasks with fixing, repairing, maintaining radiation health monitoring equipment. When you have a high-tech lab that's using all kinds of weird stuff and radiation, there's radiation monitors around the facility to make sure that everything is safe. I have several credible sources that basically say Bob Lazar worked at Los Alamos, yes, but he was a low-level technician. In the phone book that George Knapp found, the letters KM were next to his name. That's because he was a KM employee. I got a hold of that. And in that book, there are multiple people with KM next to their names. Again, that was just a formatting of the phone book. So KM, he worked for Kirk Meyer. And again, Kirk Meyer didn't hire physicists at all. There you go. Yeah, he even Jeremy Rice gets into 1977, where Bob Lazar made a rocket bike, right? And listen, I was a science nerd growing up. I guess that's one of the reasons why I really love the Bob Lazar story, because I was kind of that kid. I didn't build a rocket car, but I built a bunch of model rockets and robots and computers and electronic stuff and weird stuff. And I blew stuff up with chemistry. You know, he's my kind of guy. And I'm sure if I had met him another way, he and I would maybe become friends. He was also a big fan of Amiga computers, and so was I. Amiga computers were amazing back then. And Bob Lazar was able to do weird 3D animations of some of his claims and the flying saucers. He did those on an Amiga. Gotta love the Amiga computer. So Jeremy Rice destroys his education claims, and I'm not going to read all this because we have other material to go through. I just wanted to show you that this is huge. Look, Bob Lazar's thesis. Here are letters where people are requesting getting a copy of his master's degree thesis. And that's another part of this bullshit claim that Bob Lazar, got his it's another part of this thing that drives me crazy, because people claim that the government erased everything. You can't erase somebody's master's thesis. And by the way, most people that wrote a master's thesis spend a year or more on it. They're going to have a copy of it. I've asked 10 times. I've asked George Knapp a few times. I've asked Bob Lazar a few times. I've asked Jeremy Corbell a few times. Can I see the master's thesis? Nobody can produce it, friends. So here we have the letters, right, of people asking to see the thesis. Here's another part of this story. The W-2 and the badge. First of all, friends, right here, United States Department of Naval Intelligence, Washington, D.C. There's no such thing as the United States Department of Naval Intelligence, at least not in 1989. That was disbanded after World War II. It was once called the United States Department of Naval Intelligence, but after World War II, it was changed to the Office of Naval Intelligence. It's a small thing, but it matters, because somebody faking a W-2 might make a rookie mistake like that, but somebody who really worked for naval intelligence would not make the same mistake. Here's another problem with the W-2. Okay, first of all, here's an employee identification number. And that employee identification number does not exist. There is no employer using that employee identification number. And people have done exhaustive searches looking for that employee identification number. Now, this is the W-2 that he provided saying, here's how I was paid, right? Here's how I was paid. And it's all wrong, friends. It's all wrong. Everything in the W-2 can be picked apart as fake, right? And here we have John Andrews' correspondence. This is provided courtesy of Michael Schratt. Michael Schratt, to his credit, got a hold of a lot of documents and things from John Andrews after he passed away. And he's made most of that public. Here we see all these FOIA requests people are making, looking for that employer identification number, looking for proof of Bob Lazar's employment. Nobody can find anything. So here we see original response letter from the Department of the Treasury to John Andrews dated July 31st, 1991. Okay, I'm sorry, I was just making sure that's sharing. This is the Lazar's W-2 wage earnings statement for 1989. According to Bob Lazar's W-2 form for 1989, for the whole year, he earned a grand total of $958 working for the United States Department of Naval Intelligence. Sure seems like a token payment for working on the most significant project in human history. As the letter explains, an exhaustive search was conducted for an employer identification number, this 46-100-7639, provided by Bob Lazar, from the United States Department of Naval in the United States Department of Naval Intelligence indicated that there was no taxpayer agency or employer with this EIN. Okay, so the EIN number on this is fake. Here we're going to go back to alienscientist.com. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. And again, there's more problems with this whole thing. Here it's blacked out, but several people got copies of this W-2 with an actual Social Security number, and the Social Security number wasn't his. It was his wife's. That makes no sense. I will go out on a limb here and say that this W-2 is fake, and anybody can fake a W-2. You just get the form, and back then, I guess you would get the form and a typewriter or a printer, and you could fake a W-2. Just because you provided this doesn't mean it's real. And I, at one point in time, gave it to a few document examiners, and they couldn't tell me much because anybody can write anything in here. This W-2 is touted as proof. Well, why did he have a W-2 he could show? Nobody could verify that that W-2 is real from any government agency. It's bullshit, friends. He made it up. Now, here we go. Employer's name. And here we have, kind of a letter from John Andrews about designations and trying to determine the authenticity of that document. And Jeremy Rice makes some great points about Lazar's security clearance in his timeline, because Lazar claimed that he got a Q clearance and 8 days later, he was at Area 51. Bullshit. Never going to happen. No, not in 1988, 89. This was the height of the Cold War. You do not get a Q clearance and be at a top secret military base in 8 days. Takes about a year, I'm told at that time, from a source that works in the intelligence community, told me it would, and who has real clearance, told me it would take probably a year at that time to get a security clearance. And here we have, this is another part of this that Jeremy Rice really turned me on to, him and Dan Banker. Here we have Billy Meyer's beam ships. And they just so happen to look exactly like the flying saucer that Bob Lazar worked on. Now, everybody knows that Billy Meyer's beam ships were hubcaps glued together and things like that, trash can lids hung from strings, and he took pictures and pretended they were real. It's been thoroughly debunked that Billy Meyer just faked all his photos, all the fake evidence in the Billy Meyer case. Why is this relevant? Well, for two reasons. What are the chances that Bob Lazar's real flying saucer that he worked on looks exactly like Billy Meyer's flying saucer that's fake and was built from trash can lids and hubcaps and shit? It's ridiculous. Also, this is a little known fact. but I found mention of it in several places in John Lear's video. John Lear tells the story of Gene Huff and Bob Lazar coming to his home to do a real estate appraisal. Gene Huff was doing that for him in exchange for the Billy Meyer material. At the time, John Lear had all the books, all the videos, the documentaries, everything, and he made copies of them, gave them to Gene Huff. This is opinion and speculation, believe that Gene Huff and Bob Lazar sat around watching that stuff, and suddenly we get his flying saucer that looks exactly like Billy Meyer's flying saucer. What are the odds, friends? What are the odds? Oh, the element 115. Oh, Bob Lazar must be real. He predicted element 115 in 1989, years before it was actually discovered. Folks, it's been predicted in science books since the 1960s. Here, alien scientist Jeremy Rice finds a book from 1970, which predicts accurately element 115. People knew that element 115 would eventually be discovered. I don't know what we're up to. I think 118 or 119. So I'm going to make a prediction right now that element 120 will be discovered in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Does that make me a genius? Not really. It's an easy prediction to make. They keep every few years as the technology advances, they discover another heavy element. They synthesize it in a laboratory. S4, fact or fiction. Oh, friends, this is just great. So not to really use too much from Jeremy Rise, but I do have one more thing from Jeremy Rise, and that is about S4. S4, friends, that was the top secret base right off of Papoose Lake that Bob Lazar swore that all those flying saucers were in these hangars. It's bullshit, friends. And we've got the goods on that. Well, actually, I would say that Jeremy Rise and Dan Banker got the goods on that. And, you know, it's crazy that these guys are allowed to continue to sell these lies. You know, it's just crazy. Let me see here, friends. Give me a moment. I'm trying to find the, oh, wait, I know how I can find it. 1 second. Here it is. But I got to do it in another tab. So please bear with me. Okay. All right. And I'm going to remember to share the audio this time. Okay. So Dan Baker recently has found some amazing evidence that S4 doesn't exist, but we're going to play this clip from Alien Scientist channel. And I have to say, I didn't clear this with him, but I guess it's okay. I'm going to say fair use just in case. I don't think he would mind. Shout out to Jeremy Rise and Alien, you know, he's Alien Scientist. And, you know, I really got to say that he continues to go to amazing lengths to prove if this story is true or not. He, like me, grew up with the story, wanted to believe it. So he's been covering this for quite some time. This was an interesting piece that we found. And honestly, I'm also playing this because I was trying to find this clip of George Knapp admitting that there's nothing there. And I couldn't find the clip of George Knapp, but then I realized it's in this clip as well. So again, fair use, fair use. This is transformative work. We're educating the public, and we're going to be discussing this video. Here we go. 1 second now. Let me see. Make sure it's up. And this is all about Papoose Lake.
Papoose Lake is southwest of Area 51, and as many of you already know, Bob Lazar and many others who have recycled this material over the years claim that there is an above top secret, even more secret base than Area 51 at Papoose Lake, with 9 hangars carved into the side of the mountain which contain extraterrestrial craft. Now, I've already proved that Bob Lazar lied about his educational background and his credentials as a physicist.
Could you reveal some of the professors at MIT and Caltech?
Yeah, if you want. I don't have a list of them here. Dr. Duxler, I think, was one of them. And,
we know that he lied about element 115, the single central scientific disclosure point of his entire story. He claimed there was a stable isotope of which there is absolutely zero geological evidence for. And now I'm going to prove that he also lied about S4, a supposed super secret installation at Papoose Lake. But don't take my word for it. Here it is from George Knapp himself, the guy who made Bob Lazar famous.
I'll give you one other thing about S4 and Papoose. There was a guy named Jerry Freeman. He's an archaeologist. And you wouldn't think an archaeologist has anything to do with.
I just want to stop this for a moment and mention that it was Jeremy Rise and Dan Bankert who forced George Knapp to address this, because until they started, publicizing this information, George Knapp just ignored it. And at least to his credit, he's acknowledging it here. But I don't understand how I can still believe the story is true and still keep promoting and selling it when right here he's going to admit that there's nothing there.
Flying saucers. Jerry Freeman was studying the path of the 49ers. There was a gold rush of 1849 when thousands of people fled west to try to strike it rich. And a lot of them in covered wagons and settlers, and they had certain paths that they followed. And Jerry Freeman was trying to reconstruct the path that the 49ers had taken, and he thought that they had gone right straight across the Nevada test site, and in fact had been at Papoose Lake. So what he did was, very bold of him, he infiltrated the test site from going west to east and walked all the way across it, dodged security patrols. He would walk in the nighttime and then hide during the day, and he made it all the way across. Let's show the Freeman stuff. He made it all the way across the test site to Papoose Lake. These are pictures that he had set up with an automatic camera. That's Papoose behind him.
And there's nothing there. There's not a guard shack. There's not a road. There's nothing there. Please remember, friends, that Bob Lazar claimed that he got on a bus with blacked out windows. And I had a picture of that, but he got on a bus with blacked out windows and drove from Area 51, 10 or 15 miles to Papoose Lake. Friends, you can't drive a bus through the desert like that. They're not four-wheel drive vehicles. They're heavy. They'll get bogged down in sand, in dirt, in rocks. This is crazy. You cannot, there would at least have to be a road to the facility. There is nothing there, friends, nothing.
The place where Bob Lazar said he worked. So Freeman, again, walking at night and hiding in the day, gets all the way to Papoose. He finds the evidence he's looking for. The 49ers had carved something into the rocks there. He walked all the way across the test site, not realizing that land is still contaminated with all kinds of nuclear fallout.
Actually, here's another good point. The government could not have put a secret base there because the radiation levels are off the charts there due to nuclear testing in that area. That would be incredibly irresponsible of them. The radiation levels are so high that this gentleman may have gotten cancer just for being there for a few days. So Bob Lazar claiming that all these people are at this top secret facility working on flying saucers, they would have been irradiated and died with, it's ridiculous. And anybody can go to the Atomic Energy Commission and get the readings that prove that this area is too irradiated. You cannot hang out there. That would be extremely bad for your health.
And he died of cancer 2 years after his journey. But anyway, gave a little piece that sort of goes along with what Jim Goodall just said about people coming out of nowhere. Remember, Papoose Lake, where Lazar said there's this facility built in the side of the mountain, there is nothing there officially.
So there you go. Jerry Freeman would have been shot dead before he ever got close to such a super secret installation. There is no base.
Here's another good shot. That right up here is where the hangars are supposed to be, I believe, right? He's right there where Bob Lazar and George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell claimed this base was, the super secret base. There's nothing there. There's not a guard shack. There's not a road. If there's a base there, there would need to be all kinds of support facilities, cafeterias, living quarters, all this kind of stuff. Nothing is there, friends. Nothing.
At Papoose Lake. S4 was a lie. A stable isotope of element 115 was a lie. Doesn't exist in the geological record. Bob's degrees from Caltech and MIT were both lies. The aliens from Zeta Reticuli. You get the point. None of this is real. I know it makes for great entertainment, but seriously, kids, stay in school, go to college, take philosophy, take 4 semesters of calculus and physics, learn how to use and apply the tools of the trade, and then come back here and argue in the comments with me about why you still believe Bob Lazar. And don't worry, I got much better stuff than Element 115 coming. Stay tuned.
Remember, Papoose Lake, where Lazar said there's this facility built in the side of the mountain, there is nothing there.
There is nothing there. Yeah, too bad. Too bad. There is nothing there. And there is some more supportive evidence to prove that there is nothing there, because recently someone got permission to do a flyover that area, and we have even better close-up aerial photos of that area, which just kind of show that there's nothing there, friends. There's nothing there. And so hold on one second, I'm going to show you some of these. Okay, now let me get back to that. So somebody was allowed finally, after all this time, to fly right over the base, and what we get is a view of, again, nothing. There's not a road, there's not a guard shack, there's nothing there. It is a barren nuclear wasteland. Now, here off in the distance is Area 51, proper parts of it, right? But there's nothing at S4, friends. Nothing is there. So if you're going to believe Bob Lazar, I'm sorry, but it just, you got to believe in fairy tales, because there's no evidence that anything is there. There is no evidence that anything is there. 1 second, we have a couple of more shots of the area. This one's got a whole lot more detail. We'll share that one as well. And here we go. I don't see any hangars built into a mountain. And again, this is Papoose Lake, the dry lake bed, where Bob Lazar said they would come out. They would right around here, from some of his illustrations, I guess, is where the alien spacecraft were kept in hangars on the side of the mountain, and they would bring them out here for low performance tests, just floating them around, flying them around. I don't know. And he said that they would test them here. Friends, I don't know. I don't see anything there that indicates there's any kind of a base. It's a fantasy. It's just a fantasy, friends. There's nothing at Papoose Lake. And again, it's a nuclear wasteland. You can't put a base someplace that is so dangerous to stay at that you would contract cancer from hanging out there. The government wouldn't do that simply for liability issues, friends. Now, boy, we have so much more to cover. I kind of skipped ahead, and I wanted to sort of debut some material that I created some time ago. I created, listen, when this Jeremy Corbell documentary came out, quite honestly, I was pissed, because it seemed like he only included anything that would, bolster the story. It wasn't a documentary about the truth. It was a pro Bob Lazar propaganda fluff piece. That's what that documentary was. So I decided that what I was going to do is do my own documentary and include all of the information he left out that would indicate that Bob Lazar is lying. Now, the low-hanging fruit really is his education. But I found some incredibly interesting things about his education that I hadn't heard elsewhere, and also an explanation from Michael Schratt about his education, his master's thesis, all being erased, and him somehow being erased from every yearbook. Michael Schratt makes an excellent point here in this next clip that I'm going to play. This is some of my own work from this documentary that never finished, because things happen. But Michael Schratt makes an excellent point. If you're stupid enough to believe that Bob Lazar's entire background, his history, his education was erased from history, then you have to believe that the men in black crawled into everyone's attic, everyone's garage, stole their yearbook, and replaced it with a new yearbook erasing Bob Lazar from the yearbooks. And people, including myself, Michael Schratt, and a few others, actually have the Caltech yearbooks for the years he was supposed to be going there. actually have the MIT yearbooks for the time he was supposed to be going there. There is no mention of Bob Lazar in any of those yearbooks. But let's get to the education. This is going to be. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? Let me do this first and make sure that I have it. 1 second, friends. Okay. Just give me 1 second, friends. I want to make sure that I do this right, that we get the audio. So share audio. Yes, Chrome tab. I've titled this video, Lazar's Claims Destroyed. This is just actually on the YouTube channel, but I haven't made it public. Maybe I will after tonight so everybody can see. And again, this was a piece of an as yet unfinished documentary. And I don't know, maybe someday I'll get the passion and the drive to finish it, because I think it would be good to have a documentary that shows all of the stuff that proves he's lying, instead of just a documentary that rah, 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 Bob Lazar's telling the truth about those aliens, because that's what we got after 30 years, a pro-Lazar fluff piece. Mine is not a fluff piece, okay? So here we go. Bob Lazar's education claims destroyed. Sorry, friends, there's some missing. I forgot, there's some missing. There we go. I guess this is kind of a world premiere of my piece.
What was the year of your graduation from MIT and did you get a PhD?
No, it's a master's degree. What was the year?
Gee, what was the year I got my master's degree? He doesn't know.
Probably 82, because I think I left there.
Friends, people who got a master's degree, remember what year they got it.
Could you reveal some of the professors at MIT and Caltech?
Yeah, if you want. I don't have a list of them
Oh,
here.
I
Dr.
don't
Duxler,
I don't
think,
know
was
them.
one of them, and Hosefield was another.
Hosefield?
Hosefield. HOHSFIELD or something along those lines.
And that person was an electronics teacher
Oh, yeah,
at a community
Hosefield.
college, not a
Sure, I've
physics
got people,
professor.
that I went to school with, and George Knapp has spoken to some of them.
I certainly have trouble with Bob's claim credentials at schools. He had claimed to have degrees from MIT and Caltech. I've talked to people who saw him at Caltech, but there's no records there. I think it is entirely possible that he would exaggerate his educational background in order to get a great job. He wouldn't be the first person to do that. He wouldn't be the first person to lie about his background and education in order to get a good job. And you have to wonder, well, wouldn't the people who hired him know that? And yeah, they would have to. They do a background check. They'd have to know that.
Robert Scott Lazar, supposedly a nuclear physicist with a master's in physics from MIT, a master in electronics from Caltech, who supposedly worked on Area 51, back engineering flying saucers, figured out how they work using element 115. It's a long, detailed story. You can buy the video someplace else, not from me. I did a lot of checking on Bob. I tried to meet with him twice. I was supposed to on one occasion, and he didn't go along. I checked at MIT. I checked at Caltech. Neither one ever heard of them. Well, but the government wiped his records clean is the response. I talked to the legal counsel at MIT. No way to do that. I talked with the guy who has the degrees, the commencement lists and all that sort of thing. No mention of Lazar. None of the yearbooks show Lazar. You need it for a master's thesis, or for a master's degree, you need a thesis. I talked to the guy who holds those. No Lazar. I didn't there. He was asked publicly, when did you get your master's from MIT? Well, let me see now. I think it was, probably 1982. I have friends who went to MIT, except for myself, couldn't afford to go out of high school. And nobody who gets a master's degree in physics from MIT doesn't know what year he got it in. He was asked to name some of his professors. Well, let's see now. He named somebody, Bill, somebody, I won't use his name on here. I checked on him. It was not a common name, fortunately. He was a physicist. The only trouble is Bob said he would remember him from Caltech. This individual, Bill, never taught at Caltech. He only taught at Pierce Junior College. Now, Bob himself had mentioned Pierce to me on the phone. He did go there. Now, that's in Southern California, and he was going there at the same time that he was supposedly attending MIT, 2,500 miles east of there. One heck of a commute. If you can go to MIT, you don't go to Pierce Junior College. But beyond that, I checked with his high school. He finished in the bottom third of his high school class. You can't get into MIT if you're outside, usually the top 10, 15, 20% of your class. Bottom third, never. His Element 115 scheme won't work. Sounds good, science fiction. So, I checked with Los Alamos. He is in the phone book there. Doesn't that prove that he was a scientist working there? No, it certainly doesn't prove he was a scientist. But if you look at the phone book page, up at the very top, it says, this phone book for employees of the Los Alamos National Laboratory, the Department of Energy, Kirk Meyer Corporation, several other companies. Right after Bob's name, he was only in one phone book issue. The issue, remember, several months ago. It says K/U. That's Kirk Meyer, subcontractor. He worked out at the Maison facility. Don't need a clearance for that. People come in from all over the world, physicists, to do experiments, and he was a technician. And the story goes on and on beyond that. And I get people telling me, well, I don't see why you don't believe him. He seems so sincere. Sincerity is not a check on truth.
According to Bob Lazar, now this is his claim, he has a master's degree in physics from MIT and also a master's degree in electronics technology from Caltech. He has never produced his original master's degree from either MIT or Caltech. He's never produced it. It's a no-show. There's nothing there. He's never been able to produce the original master's degree. And every effort to locate those degrees has completely failed, including the research by Stanton Friedman. Also, I've got a copy of the MIT yearbook. During the early 1980s, Stanton Friedman did a very investigative search of the early 80s yearbooks. There's nothing there. There's no name, there's no picture. He doesn't appear in any of the yearbooks. So that's a red flag that we need to look at. I've got a letter here to John Andrews from Robert Kiesler, dated March 19th, 1990, talking about his efforts to find Bob's magnetohydrodynamic master's thesis from MIT. And it says, "Dear Mr. Andrews, I am sorry we are unable to locate a copy of Mr. Robert Scott Lazar's thesis on MHD in our facility." Let's review this. According to Lazar, then, the government not only wiped out his degrees, his both degrees, they wiped out all of the yearbooks. So in essence, they had to crawl up into the dusty ceiling attics of all the graduates from MIT and steal the yearbooks out. And then they also scrubbed his magnetohydrodynamic master's thesis. It's completely gone from every repository. That just doesn't sound logical or reasonable to me, if he's telling the truth.
It was 1990. I was working at CNN, and I was a producer, and I got a call in Atlanta at CNN at my office from Bob Lazar. And he said, we're going to be doing something on Memorial Day here. If you can get here, we'd like to have you come and be part of the festivities, and we can talk about, by then it had been very controversial, about whether or not Bob Lazar with John Lear, had Bob Lazar been telling the truth about going to Area 51, working for EG&G, all of that. So I went to Las Vegas, met with all of those guys, and was able to spend a lot of time on that Memorial Day weekend. And I believe it was 1990. And here is the moment of talking with Bob Lazar that is indelible in my mind. he was showing me in his kitchen how he ran this film for the real estate offices that he worked for, filming houses. And he was in the process of demonstrating how he was doing that, just to show me that this is what he did. And he had told me that when Stanton Friedman had questioned him about the fact that he had no degree from MIT, he said, I never ever said I had a degree from MIT or anything like that. What happened, Linda, is I'm an adopted child, and my parents lived in Florida, and they didn't make much money. And I had gone to school with some buddies. We liked electrical things. We liked engineering. We liked taking cars apart. Some of my buddies got accepted to MIT. He said, I drove up to see them as my friends. And I went to one of their classes for a few days. He would just go and sit. And he said, and I learned some things. I became even more interested in having some kind of a career in which I would be dealing with electronic and engineering things. And he said, that's what I learned at MIT. I never told anybody I got a degree. That's Bob's firsthand version to me.
This is the most bothersome part of the story. And I've talked to Bob many times. I think we're friends. I have offered him the opportunity to tell me, Bob, did you exaggerate about your educational background? Because a lot of people do that. You know that in every walk of life, in every occupation, they would exaggerate something on a resume, and he's always stuck to it. As for professors, he gave me the name of one at MIT. I checked on that. The professor is not there now. Whether he was there then, when Bob says he went there, MIT will not give me that information. I do have one person who says he went to school with Bob, or at least was aware that Bob was going to classes at Caltech. His name is Jim Tagliani. He was a technician in the stealth fighter program here in Tonopah, Nevada. He worked with Bob in the early 1980s at a place called Fairchild Zincom Systems in Simi Valley. I have some documentation to back that part of it up, and he said he remembers Bob as working a lot of weird shifts to accommodate his classes there. The only record we can have for Bob Lazar ever in college is a single class in electronics at a junior college in California.
Right.
And you don't get hired at Los Alamos with that kind of an educational background.
No, but you could get hired at Los Alamos as a radiation health monitor electronics technician. And friends, for all the years that I've looked into this story, that's what I believe, that Mr. Lazar worked on radiation health monitoring equipment. There was even some mention by John Lear of going out to areas around Area 51 and replacing or servicing these radiation health monitoring stations. So, but the education is the low-hanging fruit. That is the easy one to destroy. There's all these conflicting stories, and according to Linda Moulton Howe, I don't know how much I trust her as a source, but I wanted to include it because I hadn't heard that anywhere before. Linda Moulton Howe claims that Bob Lazar told her, I never said I went to MIT. So it led me to speculate a little bit. Maybe originally he told some of these people that when he was coming out with his story that, I just went to Pierce Junior College, and maybe some of them thought the story would be more believable if he went to MIT and Caltech. That's opinion and speculation. I don't know. But why would he tell Linda Moulton Howe that he never said he went to MIT? I found one other source where Bob Lazar apparently told them, I never went to MIT. I just hung out there. And of course, we have George Knapp, who's been making money supporting this story for 30 years. Claiming that he has a source that dropped off Bob Lazar at Caltech. So he must have went there. That's ridiculous. I have a friend who dropped me off at Drexel University. Okay. It doesn't prove that I was a student at Drexel University. In fact, I never was. I worked there for a time in their robotics research lab building Linux servers. So I had a friend dropping me off at Drexel University for a long time. Doesn't prove that I was a student there or got a degree from there. this is what we get from these people promoting the story. They just make excuses. They cannot account for this discrepancy, for this lie. And if the whole story starts with a bunch of lies about his education, why should we trust anything that he says? The claims just get more fantastical. Education is easy to prove or disprove. It goes to his credibility. If he starts his story with lies about his education, you have to question everything he says. Now, we're gonna check one more piece of this never finished documentary that I made, which concerns George Knapp, especially Jeremy Corbell and Bob Lazar's claims that he passed a lie detector test. And I gotta say, Jeremy Corbell was posting this story around the time his documentary hit that somebody wrote claiming that Bob Lazar passed 4 lie detector tests. What people don't know is that the person who administered the test was close friends with George Knapp. And the lie detector tests were done right after Stanton Friedman busted him on his fake education. I believe they did this because they needed to bolster the story somehow to keep it going. And it's no coincidence that out of all the lie detector people that George Knapp could have tapped to do a lie detector test on this person, Bob Lazar, he chose a close friend of his, a former police officer who worked in corporate security that was also a polygraph examiner. Now, I talked to the National Polygraph Examiners Association about sort of ethics and morality. Is this right that this journalist gets a good friend of his to do this lie detector test, which really it's 4 lie detector tests. And here's another important part. They make these claims like Bob Lazar passed 4 lie detector tests. It's almost implying that there were 4 separate tests, 4 separate polygraph examiners. That's not the case. The only person that administered a polygraph exam to Mr. Lazar is this close friend of George Knapp's, Terry Tavernetti, who, by the way, has made many conflicting statements that I have found. One documentary, he says, if he's lying, he should be in Hollywood because he gave absolutely no indication of deception. In another documentary, he basically spills the beans that Bob Lazar failed the first test. And so they gave him 3 more. Friends, again, I contacted the National Polygraph Examiners Association to confirm what I already knew. You don't give somebody 4 chances to pass a lie detector test. You get 1 go at it. If you indicate deception on the first test, then you failed. And according to Terry Tavernetti himself in this documentary, we're going to play a clip from this, he was indicating deception in the first test. He was not doing well. So what, Terry Tavernetti, to help your friend George Knapp out, you gave him 3 more tests? You kept giving him tests until he passed one? That's not the way polygraphs work or are supposed to work. And I've talked to a few people in law enforcement that administer polygraph exams. They all agree with me. You don't get 4 chances to pass a lie detector test. And according to the National Polygraph Examiners Association, this Terry Tavernetti morally and ethically should have refused George Knapp's request because they were friends. They had an existing relationship. Doesn't look good, right? Terry Tavernetti, according to the National Polygraph Examiners Association, should have told George Knapp, we have a friendship, we have a pre-existing relationship, so I cannot be the examiner. Here's a list of qualified examiners that don't know you, you don't have a relationship with, that you can go and have the test administered so that they're fair and accurate. That's not what happened here. In my opinion, this is a friend helping a friend bolster a failing story. Remember, the story was failing at the time that these so-called lie detector tests were administered. And I have another clip here from this never finished documentary. And this clip really drives home the point that you can't trust the claims about lie detectors, because in one interview, he's saying there was no deception. And in the other one, he spills the beans. There's a huge discrepancy here. Which one is it? Terry Tavernetti, George Knapp, Bob Lazar? Did he pass 4 lie detector tests, or did he fail the first one and he just kept giving him more until he passed? Let's take a listen to this Terry Tavernetti being interviewed about these polygraphs. And I think you're going to agree with me that something's not right about these so-called lie detector tests. Oh, you know what? I almost did it again. Let me do that. Let me try this again. Share audio. I got to always remember that, friends. And this is titled, Why George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, and Bob Lazar's Passing a Lie Detector Claims Are Total Bullshit. And here we go, friends.
Now, before you toss Lazar on the pile with all the other UFO wackos, understand that he willingly agreed to take a lie detector test, requested and independently arranged by a Las Vegas reporter. Terry Tavernetti is the ex-cop who administered the test.
If he's lying, he ought to be in Hollywood, because he gave absolutely no physiological indications of attempting deception.
We started the first test, and it went exactly the way I thought it might. He was not doing well. He was reacting to the relevant questions more than he was to the control type of questions, which is indicative of a person who is deceptive, because it's showing an emotion that he does not feel comfortable with his answers. These questions bother him.
He gave absolutely no physiological indications of attempting deception.
He was not doing well. He was reacting to the relevant questions more than he was to the control type of questions.
No physiological indications of attempting deception.
Deceptive, because it's showing an emotion that he does not feel comfortable with his answers. It's deceptive, deceptive, deceptive.
Attempting deception.
Deceptive, indicative of a person who is deceptive. Who is deceptive. He was not doing well. Deceptive. He was not doing well. Deceptive, deceptive, deceptive.
And there we have it, friends. And, you know, I got to say that anytime there's anything out there in the media that these people can use to bolster their claims, like somebody writes a story that says Bob Lazar passed 4 lie detectors, Jeremy Corbell is right there to say, see, the story's real. But again, folks, if you peel the onion, take a few layers off those layers of deception that these people are using to fool people and bolster their fake claims, these lie detector claims are ridiculous. A good friend of George Knapp's gives him 4 different tests. And again, there's no record of any other polygraph examiner. There's no record of anyone else being involved in this, or it's just this friend of George Knapp's that can't get his story straight about what happened when the tests were done. I find those claims to be ridiculous and dubious at best, that people would use this as evidence that he's telling the truth. No, friends, I don't think so. So, you know, what we get is his excuses and lies for his education. We get excuses and lies about him passing lie detector tests administered by a close friend of George Knapp's, done in a completely, totally, morally, and ethically wrong way, a way that no other polygraph examiner does things, and we're supposed to just believe. I'm sorry, no. Now, we did mention Bob Lazar's, or we did mention Jeremy Rye's alien scientist before. And one of the things that I find most interesting about the Bob Lazar case is that any real scientist that chimes in on Bob Lazar's fake science immediately says it's fake. And these are all people that have real science degrees. Every single person that I know with a real science degree who I've asked, and I've asked quite a few, including Stanton Friedman, he and I talked about this. Jeremy Rye has a real physics degree. There's a famous video of 2 physicists watching Bob Lazar explain how those flying saucers work, and both of them were like, this is science fiction. This is not reality. This isn't real. This can't be real. This can't work. But I found an excellent sort of explanation into just the science, right? The science behind Bob Lazar's and why it doesn't work, why it is completely wrong if you're a real scientist. Bob Lazar basically claimed that you put this little tiny piece of element 115 in this reactor and it creates enough energy to basically open wormholes, which is ridiculous, friends, because to open a wormhole, you would need an awful lot of energy, a lot more energy than a little piece of anything could provide. His science doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. And we've got a really excellent sort of breakdown of some of the Bob Lazar science and why it's hokey and stupid. We're gonna play a clip. Okay, and again, I'm going to cite fair use, and just because I forgot, I'd like to cite fair use on all those clips about the education and those 2 clips about the lie detector tests. Again, this is fair use, transformative work. We're educating the public. We're discussing and critiquing these things, and that is the definition of fair use. So we've got another sort of video that I think is excellent because it explains why Bob Lazar's fake science is fake and cannot work. And again, I'm going to cite fair use, and we are going to, I'm going to stop this every once in a while and comment on it just so that we're good with fair use. And this video is titled Bob Lazar, Area 51, Element 115, Alien Gravity Propulsion. Could it work?
He said, in this video, I'm going to look specifically at the science of the spacecraft and the propulsion systems as described by Mr. Lazar and tell you whether this technology is plausible based on proven scientific concepts that we humans know to be true. In the Netflix documentary, Mr. Lazar outlines how the space folding engines on these spacecraft are set up.
Underneath, the floor below, are the gravity emitters. The center antenna is really an extension of the reactor in the center, and that's a waveguide, which allows the emission of the gravity wave, which forms kind of a heart shape over the whole craft. That's how it creates its distortion. These gravity emitters can be swung all the way up to 180 degrees.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot more that I could say about some of his fake science, but maybe we'll get to that as we go along.
And this allows the craft to essentially stand on 2 of them and hover, while this one swings up and creates a distortion in front of it, allowing the craft to slide forward. So that's how their low power mode, Omicron configuration operate. The Delta.
And Bob Lazar at various times has mentioned this Omicron configuration, Delta configuration. I haven't found any supportive evidence that those are real terms. I think he just made them up, but that's just me.
The configuration uses all 3, and unlike science fiction movies where you see flying saucers just flying along like that, they actually fly belly first. The craft flies along, leaves the atmosphere of the planet. It turns its belly to the destination. The 3 amplifiers focus in on the destination, and that's how it proceeds.
And here's another point I'd like to make. In every one of his illustrations, the seats are molded into the craft. If this thing flies face forward like that, then the people would be in an awfully awkward position. If the craft is right side up, they'd be sitting like I'm sitting. If the craft is upside down, they'd be sitting, I guess, like they're in a rocket ship. I don't understand how people are supposed to travel through interstellar space in that position, but okay.
Incredible claims like folding space require incredible evidence. There's no physical evidence to speak of, but there is his report. In the documentary, he describes the physical setup of the engines, but what the documentary did not show is his description of how the alien engine works. I found an archived document on the internet that showed his description of the engine that he had on his website in 1996, and a review of it by a particle physicist, Dr. David Morgan.
By the way, Bob Lazar used to have a great deal of information on the website, and he put up information about how these spacecraft worked and all kinds of things, drawings. He took it all down. And I think there's a reason for that, because putting that information out there didn't help his case, because it allowed people that are actual scientists to look into it and pick it apart. And I don't believe he liked that.
There's a link in the description if you want to see it. Here's how Mr. Lazar described the alien propulsion system. It generates a intense gravitational field, and using that field to distort space-time, bringing the destination to the source and allowing you to cross many light years of space in little time without traveling in a linear mode near the speed of light. Well, distorting space-time is not a big deal. All matter distorts space-time. That's what gravity is. Your body is distorting space-time right now. What Mr. Lazar, I think, is alluding to is the idea of creating a wormhole in space to go instantly from one location to another. This idea of folding space or creating a wormhole through space instead of traversing through space idea has been talked about for decades in scientific circles. It's been used in movies like Interstellar. It is theoretical and not anything new. The problem is that in order to create a wormhole this size, that might allow this kind of travel, you would need one big enough for the spacecraft to go through, and one that would last more than billionths of a second. This, according to everything we know, requires an enormous amount of energy. I don't mean like the energy of a hydrogen bomb, which converts about 2 pounds of matter into energy. I mean the energy created if the entire mass of the Earth was turned completely into energy using Einstein's equation E equals mc squared, and possibly even more mass than that. But
Sorry about that. So here's the deal, friends. If you believe that Bob Lazar is telling the truth, then you have to believe that Einstein is wrong. Because according to Einstein's theory of relativity, it would take, like this gentleman is mentioning, an Earth-size mass converted 100% into energy, and even that might not be enough. You'd have to believe that Bob Lazar is somehow smarter than Einstein. I'm not buying it.
according to Mr. Lazar, the fuel for this spaceship comes from a few hundred pounds of element 115. Now, I'll get into the element 115 in a minute.
No, this gentleman in this video, I have to say, he did a great job on this video, but he's a little inaccurate here. Bob Lazar has said that they had about 500 pounds worth of element 115. But the fuel to actually make the spacecraft go was just this little, you could hold it between your two fingers, this little triangle-sized piece of element 115. I don't know how far you could go on that, but the spacecraft would fly with just that little tiny piece of element 115. It wasn't hundreds of pounds of fuel. But even if it was hundreds of pounds of fuel, that's still not enough to make this work.
But a few hundred pounds of any matter would not come anywhere close to creating the amount of energy needed for this. The other inconvenience with creating a wormhole is that everything would be sucked into the wormhole, not just the spaceship, but also all the air, the buildings nearby, the trees, the grass, the city, probably half of Nevada. Dr. Morgan says that all...
And Bob Lazar once described standing under the craft while it was floating and operating. If that were the case, he would be sucked into the wormhole as well. I assume, I don't know.
All of Earth would be sucked into it. But I think the wormhole would likely collapse before that happened. Why would everything be sucked into it? Because if you distort space-time, it creates gravity. And all matter is going to be attracted to this gravity. Gravity does not discriminate between the spaceship and everything else around it. Now, a lot of people give credence to Mr. Lazar because he supposedly talked about element 115 back in 1989, well before it was discovered. Element 115 was actually synthesized by the Russians in 2003 and is now known on the periodic table as moscovium.
And again, the discovery of element 115 was predicted in science and chemistry books even as far back as the 1960s. There was also an article of Scientific American talking about element 115 and how it may soon be discovered, what properties it might have, which came out right before Bob Lazar came out with his fantastical claims.
So proponents say, how could he have known about element 115? Well, here's the thing about the elements. In order to predict elements that haven't been discovered yet, all you have to do is look at the periodic table. Naturally occurring elements stop at element 92, uranium. Everything heavier than uranium is synthesized in a lab. So over time, for example, neptunium, plutonium, etc., were synthesized as soon as we had the technology to do it. Currently, elements up to 118 have been synthesized. It doesn't take a genius to predict what elements will be synthesized next.
Yeah, and this is the point that I made. Like, okay, so we're up to 118. Anybody can predict that 119 will be discovered next. Friends, the science just doesn't work. And, I don't think that it's a coincidence that every actual scientist that you ask will tell you that the science Bob Lazar presents is science fiction. It just can't work. So, that's where we're at with the so-called science. Okay, so yeah, we've had Jeremy Rise, alien scientist who has a real physics degree. There's two physicists on YouTube going over this and saying it's bunko. We've had Stanton Friedman and multiple other physicists and science officers say that his plans just won't work. There's a lot of fake claims that Bob Lazar has made that can be picked apart easily. One of my favorite claims is, and George Knapp says this all the time, he's got to be a scientist. He's got a particle accelerator in his bedroom. Friends, you can't fit a particle accelerator in somebody's bedroom. That's a completely and totally fake claim. And George Knapp and Bob Lazar and Jeremy Corbell have made that claim over and over again. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that they could just say this stuff. That's ridiculous. Ask any scientist, a physicist, can you fit a particle accelerator in your bedroom? No. You need square miles to create a real particle accelerator capable of doing any useful work. Might he have had something like a particle accelerator, like a technology demonstrator or a little kit in it? Maybe, but it couldn't do anything. It just doesn't work, friends. You can't have a particle accelerator in your house. And again, boy, there's so much more to cover. I thought it important to at least reference my previous show from the Midnight Hour on Bob Lazar because there was two important clips, and I tried to find them again, and I was unable to do so. And these clips involved Bob Lazar claiming on Larry King that the gravity waves from the craft should be detected. And there's a thing. There is an observatory specifically designed to detect gravity waves, and I called them. And I spoke to some nice, kind physicists that worked there, and I started telling them the Bob Lazar story. One of them emailed me in correspondences, back and forth, and the gist of it is that no, nobody has ever detected gravity waves in our atmosphere or even in our solar system, and they've been set up to do so for quite some time. If these craft were being test flown, they would have detected the gravity waves that these craft are generating, and they never have. And my thanks to the scientists there at LANL who were kind enough to look at Bob Lazar's science and how these craft work and tell me if they could detect the gravity waves. If this craft was creating gravity waves, could they detect it? There were some very kind people there that were very patient with me in trying to explain why that is absolutely crazy and couldn't happen, because they would have detected it. Their instruments are extremely, extremely sensitive. They can detect gravity waves galaxies away, I believe. So if there was gravity waves right in Earth's atmosphere, of course they would detect them, and they never have. So friends, we're gonna kick things old school now and go back to the Midnight Hour, because I have this explanation and this clip of Bob Lazar talking on Larry King, and there's one other very important clip in here, and we're going to let this go because these are two very important parts that prove Bob Lazar is lying. And it just goes on and on. You can just keep going with this. It seems like catching him in lies is easy. It's easy to catch Bob Lazar in lies. It's easy to catch George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell lying about this case, or using any little thing they can to try to bolster their claims. It's hard to show the evidence, and they can't, and they won't. But here we go. Let's go to a clip about this gravity waves and about the size of the hangars and the size of the spacecraft, which is another easy way to show that Bob Lazar is lying. And again, this is from the midnight hour. I would cite fair use, but this is my own work. So, but I'm going to cite fair use of the clips of Larry King's show, which we're playing in this little segment.
I don't have proof of this, but it's just something that I want you to think about. And let's also think about all the times Bob Lazar has been caught in outright lies. Generally, Bob Lazar will not give interviews, and he will certainly not give interviews unless he has the questions in advance so he can prepare his answers. That's something that I've heard. Don't know if it's true, but Bob Lazar was on an episode of Larry King where viewers were sending in questions. And I gotta say, I was so happy to hear that at least two of the questions Bob was asked, he completely and totally proved himself to be a fraud, a fake, and a liar. I caught this. I'm not sure that other people did, but let's let you listen to the first question that I think proves him a fraud, a fake, and a liar. And I'm going to tell you why. Let's listen to the first question. It's about gravity waves.
Bob, if a spacecraft distorted space-time in order to travel massive distances, assuming they don't make any arduously large number of tiny jumps, would you expect such distortion to cause detectable gravity waves?
Yes, I would, depending on the direction the craft is traveling. Yeah, I would imagine we would be able to detect some gravity waves from that.
Wow, so once Bob Lazar and I actually agree on something. He's right. If a craft worked in the way that Bob Lazar described the craft that he worked on worked, we would absolutely be able to detect those gravity waves. But there's a big problem with Bob Lazar's story of how this alien spacecraft he claims he worked on, he claims he viewed tests of, worked. We would be able to detect those gravity waves. I have to tell you, folks, about something called LIGO, the laser interferometer. I have to tell you, folks, about something called LIGO, L-I-G-O, the laser interferometer gravitational wave observatory. This is something that we have. We have an observatory that is, its sole purpose is to detect and study gravity waves. And if a craft operated the way that Bob Lazar claims the flying saucers he worked on operated, we would be able to detect those gravity waves. Even Bob Lazar, when asked the question from a viewer of Larry King's show, agreed, yes, we would be able to detect those gravity waves. I wanted to be sure. So I called LIGO and talked to some very kind astrophysicists and physicists who work there. One of them was even kind enough to review Bob Lazar's so-called science. He called me back, and I have to say, this is a real scientist who works at LIGO. And he told me that in his professional opinion, Bob Lazar's science is science fiction. It's not real, folks. And here's why. If Bob Lazar is telling the truth about how these craft, these so-called flying saucers, operated, then LIGO would be able to detect them traveling through space anywhere near our solar system. Their observatory has a massive reach, folks. They've never detected detectable gravity waves in our own solar system. And they've certainly never detected gravity waves in Earth's atmosphere. Bob Lazar claimed that these craft distorted space-time and generated gravity waves. That's how they operated. This is Bob Lazar's own claims, folks. And a real scientist that works at a real scientific organization and observatory that is designed specifically to study gravity waves says that Bob Lazar's science is fake. And Bob Lazar's claims that any so-called flying saucer or experimental craft that used gravity waves or time-space distortion to propel the craft is a complete and total science fiction fantasy.
Oh, sorry about that. So yeah, the major point, again, we keep hammering this. Anytime you ask a real scientist to look at Bob Lazar's so-called science, they inevitably always tell you the same thing. It doesn't work. Now we're going to get to the next question on Larry King. And see, here is, I've heard that Bob Lazar needs to question scripted in advance, and he's always got to have a handler with him and, helping him remember the story, I guess. I don't know. But when Bob Lazar is put to task, you know, when he's called out on the carpet and he just has to answer real questions from real people, he fails miserably. And we're going to see my favorite example of him failing miserably to answer a question. Bob Lazar is very, very fond of saying all these people get caught up in the minutia. That's not important. Little things matter. Little things like the size of the spacecraft and the size of the hangar doors in the drawings that Bob Lazar made. Friends, when I heard this, I almost fell off my chair when I heard this question asked and answered. So let's see if we can get to it.
This is a real scientist, folks, who works at LIGO studying gravity waves. He says that if a craft such as Bob Lazar describes ever was test flown in our atmosphere, they would certainly have detected those gravity waves, and they never have. If a craft such as Bob Lazar describes ever traveled anywhere near, he said, our solar system, then LIGO, that observatory, would certainly have detected that time-space distortion, would have detected those gravity waves. And they never ever have, folks. That's the end of the story. A real scientist looked at his so-called propulsion
game
system and
over,
said it's
Bob
a science
Lazar.
fiction fantasy, and he has actual scientific evidence to back him up. If a flying saucer or any craft really worked that way, they would have detected it, and they never have, folks. It's a fantasy, a fraud, a fake, a con. Let's move on to the next question that he was asked, and this one is even more shocking.
How big were the spacecrafts from Area 51 that the reverse engineering
Again,
was
fair
done?
use. Fair
I think it
use.
was about 52 feet in diameter.
And ladies and gentlemen, I have to say, when I heard Bob Lazar answer this question, I almost fell off my chair. This is another one of those little things that Bob Lazar says people get lost in. The minutia, right? It's a little thing. How big was the craft? But it's a big thing. It's a really big thing that Bob Lazar says that the craft, the flying saucers that he worked on at Area 51 were 52 feet in diameter. Because this, my friends, this little thing, more than anything else lately, proves what a complete and total liar and a fraud and fake Bob Lazar is. He's saying that the craft that he worked on were 52 feet in diameter. Now, I'm not a senior staff level physicist. I'm not even that good at math, but I can do third grade math. And I got to tell you that anybody that can do third grade math can tell that Bob Lazar is a liar, just based on how he answered this question that he was asked on this Larry King show about how big the craft are. And here's why. I mentioned my intense interest in his story and how I have been collecting things for a very, very long time. And I'm sure that at some point I had drawings that Bob Lazar made when he first came out with a story about the hangar bay doors. But I had to be sure. So I went to the man who knows, Dan Benkert, who's one of the most knowledgeable people I know about the Bob Lazar case. Shout out to Dan Benkert. And I asked him, didn't Bob Lazar do some drawings and say how big the hangar bay doors were? And I got to tell you, the man who knows, Solar Marshall, came through and he sent me, once again, those original drawings that Bob Lazar made that had some scribbles about dimensions. And folks, here's where it gets completely convincing that Bob Lazar is full of shit. And here's why. In the drawing, the first drawing, near as I can tell, that Bob Lazar made of the so-called base where he worked on these alien flying saucers, he drew the facility and the hangar bay doors. And included in that drawing that was drawn by Bob Lazar, he says that the hangar bay doors were 40 feet wide. Now, like I said, folks, I'm not a physicist. I'm not even that good at math, but I can do third grade math. So I'm going to ask you a very important question. How does a 52-foot diameter spacecraft get in and out of a 40-foot hangar door? Now, I wanted to be absolutely certain, so I went on a hunt, and I probably had to waste a great deal of time listening to, I don't know, so many hours of Bob Lazar and interviews with him, where he basically proved himself a liar. Because, my friends, if the craft was 52 feet in diameter, multiple times, he has described the hangar bay doors as being less than 52 feet. Most often, he said they were 40 feet wide. There's no way, folks, that a 52-foot aircraft, drone, airplane, flying saucer, there's nothing that's 52 feet in diameter that's going to fit out of a 40-foot hangar door. This is one of those minutiae, those things he doesn't want you to be concerned with. But what do you?
Yeah, friends. So, I mean, that's Bob Lazar himself giving us a drawing saying the hangar bay doors are 40 feet wide. And when asked how big the craft were on Larry King, he said they were 52 feet in diameter. You're not getting a 52-foot flying saucer in and out of a 40-foot hangar bay door. And friends, it just goes on and on and on. I could do this all night. We could just keep going for 8 hours of showing all of these Bob Lazar lies. It's ridiculous that this man and his supporters, most of which have made money as well from this fake story, are allowed to continue to go on with this fake story. It's ridiculous. It's amazing to me that they can continue to do this stuff, but they do. I'm going to go back to my notes. Okay, so we've covered. Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that I mentioned earlier, I said LANL, which is a different laboratory. The laboratory that I spoke with about the gravity waves is actually called LIGO. So just a correction there. Now, yeah, we could get into the FBI raid at the end of the so-called Bob Lazar documentary. And that, again, is sort of a joke. It's really sort of a joke, friends, because I just can't even believe that they thought that they could get away with using the FBI raid as a great ending. Look, the FBI raided Bob Lazar's business. They must have been looking for that flying saucer fuel, right? The element 115. And friends, this is a plot device. You know why I know it's a plot device? Because the same plot device was used in the screenplay, the Hollywood screenplay that Bob Lazar's buddy wrote, right? It never got turned into a movie. But the exact same plot device was used in the Hollywood screenplay. That Bob Lazar, he still had some element 115. He could prove the whole story true. But God damn it, the government came in and raided his house and stole back the element 115. That story was out there. The story that happened was out there long before this film. Okay? So then the film comes up, they need an ending, and suddenly Bob Lazar's business gets raided, right? And suddenly they're saying it's because he had the element 115 and he was under surveillance and all of this nonsense. It's nonsense, friends. The actual raid on his business had nothing to do with element 115 or Bob Lazar's stupid flying saucer stories. And I know that because I talked to the chief of police in that town, and that person verified for me that no, he was in all the briefings, he hung around with the FBI agents, and there was no talk of element 115. Nobody even knew, right? That nobody from the FBI, according to the local police chief, mentioned that Bob Lazar was that Area 51 alien guy. In fact, the briefings were a very serious sort of, sorry, friends, I'm trying to get this story up so I can share it. Now I can't find the article. Well, oh, that's because I'm copying too. That could be why. Yeah, let me get this article up. And so what happened is I filed a FOIA request. Actually, I'm going to show that. Okay, yeah, and there's a Vice article about this so-called raid on Bob Lazar's business. And actually, it was written by Tim McMillan, who I sort of follow on Twitter. I think he's very grounded and a trustable person when it comes to any story. He does good research. So I'm gonna, one second. I have that up. Now I'm trying to get this FOIA request up. So when I heard, as soon as I saw this documentary, I call it a documentary loosely. Again, I think it's a pro Lazar fluff piece designed to sell, and that's its only purpose. They're not after the truth. They just want to sell you something, a story that just might be true. So as soon as this came out and they had this raid on his business claiming it was about element 115, I filed a FOIA request and to get the actual documents. Oh, that's not good. Uh-oh. Okay, let me try this again. Let me close a few things just in case that's affecting things. I'm on a new computer here, which may be affecting why I'm having a little bit of trouble. I'm going to try this one more time. It seemed like it was going to freeze. So, yeah. Oh, I got to open it again. One second. So when I heard this story, I filed my own FOIA requests to get copies of the actual warrant and things like that to verify if it had anything to do with element 115 or to see if he was actually under surveillance or anything like that. No, it's not going to let me do that. All right, friends, I'm going to have to just read that. This is my FOIA request. It went to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Record Information Dissemination Section, 170 Marcel Drive, Winchester, Virginia, 22602. And I wrote, Dear FOIA Officer, pursuant to Freedom of Information Act 5 USC, yada, yada, I am requesting the following. All documents or records in which the relevant documents directly or indirectly relate to an FBI raid or criminal investigation carried out on July 20th, 2017 at the business United Nuclear, which is located at the following address. I gave the address. If it helps with your search, the business proprietor's name is Robert Lazar. The date range of the request is July 1st, 2017 through July 31st, 2017. The raid occurred on July 20th, 2017. I'm requesting a waiver of all fees as a member of the news media and independent broadcaster, yada, yada. And this assigned me and my producer at the time for the Midnight Hour show. And we got back all of those same documents, which a Lieutenant McMillan, Tim McMillan, got the same thing, and he got it quicker than me. I guess he filed his requests sooner, but he wrote an article on Vice about the raid and Bob Lazar and George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell's claim that it was about something to do with element 115. And that article is titled, Bob Lazar says the FBI raided him to seize Area 51 alien fuel. The truth is weirder. So I don't want to read this entire article, but I'll put a link to it in the description box below so that you can read the entire article. And here we see Jeremy Corbell with his cash cow, Bob Lazar, right? Okay, so this gives a breakdown of them preparing preparing to raid his business. Now, I'm so glad that this is listed here because I always call it thorium. But what the FBI were actually looking for during that raid was sales records related to thallium that he sells on his website. Thallium was used allegedly in a murder, and this was a murder investigation. Now, there's some very important parts to this fake story about Element 115. Bob Lazar, Jeremy Corbell, and George Knapp have claimed that there was 30 agents there and all these trucks and everything. No, friends. I talked to the local police chief. He was there the entire time. There was 10 or 11 people there, including law enforcement agents from the state the murder took place, FBI guys. And yes, there was a guy in a hazmat suit because Bob Lazar sells all kinds of crazy stuff at his business. So he went in there first and made sure it was safe for them to go in there and look for whatever they were looking for. But there's been repeated claims from Bob Lazar, Jeremy Corbell, and George Knapp that there was 30 people there and there was all these people there. They didn't need all these people. No, there was 10 or less people there, according to the police chief who was there. So that's an outright lie. Again, the entire raid was nothing to do with Bob Lazar. It was a murder investigation. They got a warrant to get his sales records and to get, I suppose, the thallium that he was selling that someone allegedly used to kill their wife with. And and Bob Lazar first said, we had a customer a few years ago that murdered his wife. And again, I have to say allegedly because I don't know if that guy got convicted. FBI, local law enforcement came with a warrant to get our records on him. We provided them the documents and all the information they had on him. And here's him doing a Reddit post on the day that the raid took place. Why he would do that, except to promote this film, which was dropping any minute, I don't know. Okay. The spokesman for the Michigan State Police declined to comment on the search. Houghton Police Chief John Donnelly confirmed his department and his primary agent responsible for the investigation of Jan Sterl's death. However, he declined to comment further. I got the same person, Mr. Donnelly, to comment, and he told me he was in on all that. First of all, there was no surveillance. The FBI arrived perhaps the day before the raid. They did a briefing with the local law enforcement agency, and he's the police chief, and with some of the other people that were involved, which were out of state law enforcement agents from the state that the raid actually took place. So yeah, there was no surveillance of Bob. They didn't hear a conversation about Jeremy Corbell and him talking, and Bob Lazar talking about Element 115. That's a fantasy generated by Corbell to sell a film. And this article goes on to talk about, 2017 wasn't the first time Lazar and United Nuclear have been raided by law enforcement. No, he's been raided multiple times once he was raided for selling fireworks, making material that he did not have a license to sell. And also in 2003, after he unwittingly sold federal agents banned chemicals. Yeah, that's the illegal fireworks. Oh, wow. Later, in 2006, he pleaded guilty to violating the Federal Hazardous Substances Act and was sentenced to a $7,500 fine and 3 years federal probation. And this is not the first time that Bob Lazar has been in legal trouble. Remember, he got arrested for running an illegal whorehouse. That's a great source of information. The guy ran an illegal whorehouse. Okay? The guy's not credible. I'm sorry. If you run a whorehouse, I'm not going to trust you about your flying saucer alien stories. Tim McMillan goes on to write, to date, there's never been any tangible evidence proving Lazar ever set foot inside Area 51, much less worked on alien spaceships or obtained any mysterious element. Yeah, and the article goes on, and here is the Michigan Department of State Police document. I have this as well, but it's just easier to show them from here. And this is the people. This is, again, documents related to the actual raid. And, again, the had absolutely nothing to do with element 115, completely unrelated matter. But Jeremy Corbell and Bob Lazar and George Knapp are going to claim that, oh no, that was just a cover story, that murder investigation. Yeah, no, they were there to get that element 115, bro. And I got to tell you, I corresponded with George Knapp about this. I wrote, let me see, I was going to show you it, but I'm just going to read this to you. And this is correspondence between George Knapp and myself. After I talked to the police chief, I went to George Knapp, and I was kind of like, wanting to see what George Knapp was going to say after I talked to the police chief, who said this flying saucer story bullshit was bullshit. He was there the entire time. Okay, so I said that the raid on United Nuclear had nothing to do with element 115. I had and still have a source at the local police department. I stand by my statement saying that it had anything to do with 115 was just a plot device used to sell the film. I'm sorry if we disagree on this, George, but the docs are out and obviously don't mention 115. I spoke with the local police chief who was in on the raid, who said it had absolutely nothing to do with element 115. He heard no mention of element 115 in the briefings. He saw no one looking for element 115. No, they simply went there and got the documents that they needed and searched Lazar's business for those documents. It was simply a routine raid related to a criminal investigation, a murder investigation. People are already calling Corbell a liar. Let me guess, this was just a cover story. Yeah, imagine that I guessed that they would say it was a cover story, and that the men in black used to get to the 115. I filed FOIA requests for these documents, but someone got to them sooner than me. I go on to say that I grew up watching you and Bob. I always wanted the story to be true. Some part of me still hopes it is, but I have to know the truth. Does not look like Corbell and Lazar were telling any kind of truth about the raid on Bob Lazar's business. Best regards, Stephen. And to his credit, George Knapp will at least try to answer critics or other researchers. And what he says in reply to me is, you are welcome to believe whatever you want. We've been trying to get, again, this is George Knapp replying to me. He said, we've been trying to get a copy of the warrant for almost 2 years. The story Jeremy told in the film is exactly what happened. And I don't understand them trying to get a copy of the warrant for almost 2 years. I got it shortly after I filed a FOIA request. I mean, within 2 or 3 weeks, which is kind of quick, but I did. I got the documents in 3 weeks. I don't know why they couldn't file a FOIA request and get the same documents that Tim McMillan got and I got and other researchers got. That does not seem plausible to me that they've been trying for 2 years. And I believe that if you're the subject of an FBI raid and they have a warrant, you're entitled to a copy. He could walk into his local FBI office and request a copy, Bob Lazar, and get it. 2 years, he never got it. George Knapp goes on to say the story Jeremy told in the film is exactly what happened. Bob was not given a copy of the warrant, nor was he allowed to read it, but he was told by the agents that the official reason for the raid was to find evidence related to a murder case. There was no lie told. I kind of, accused Corbell and Lazar and him of lying about this raid. There was no lie told then or now. The reason both he and I suspect the true intention was to find 115 has been explained several times. No one at the time has claimed the search warrant mentioned 115. My own suspicion, they didn't need to conduct lengthy surveillance operation. They didn't need 23 agents, cops, and techs to obtain a sales record. Again, that is inaccurate. There was not 23 agents. There wasn't 30 or 40 as Corbell and Lazar claimed. There was 10. There was around 10 people there, and that included the FBI. That included a person that's trained to deal with hazmat situations, to go in and clear the business. That included the out-of-state law enforcement agents where the murder took place. There was 10 or less people present at the raid. There wasn't 23 agents. There wasn't 30 or 40 like these people would have you believe. That's just an exaggeration and a falsehood. Okay, all they had to do was ask for it. So what were they looking for? Why such a large operation? Why is the FBI involved in a routine murder case? Hey, George Knapp, it was interstate, okay? The person that murdered his wife ordered thallium from Bob Lazar's business, which was in a whole nother state. It makes it a federal crime. That's why the FBI were involved in a routine murder case. And you're supposed to be a great journalist that's covered crime. You told me later in this letter that you've covered hundreds of murder investigations. Wouldn't you know that the FBI was involved in a routine murder case because it was across interstate lines? I don't know. I think you should. If Lazar was involved in a murder, where are the charges? He wasn't involved directly, but he did apparently or allegedly sell this gentleman who killed his wife the thallium, which is a rare element. If he was selling something illegal, where are the charges? I don't know. I don't know that it was illegal to sell thallium. I still am unclear on that. The limited facts about a murder investigation were reported from day one. That's what Lazar said he was told by the agents. This is what the employee told the local newspaper the following day. It is the story he told in Jeremy's film, and it is what he has told audiences as well. But he also shared the suspicions he had, and that I share, that they were looking for something else, which is why that team searched every single inch of Lazar's building. You know, and this again, I have a problem with. Ask anybody you know in law enforcement. If they've got a warrant to search a business, they're going to look for other crimes. That's just how they're trained. They're going to look for other. This guy has already been arrested for selling things he didn't have the legal right to sell. Of course, they're going to look through everything and try to get additional charges against whoever, Bob or whatever. They're going to be thorough. So to say because they were thorough, they were looking for flying saucer fuel is a big leap, George Knapp, a big leap. Now he goes on to say, it is unlikely we will ever get to see the original warrant. But for almost 2 years, the UFO public has accused Jeremy of making it all up. Nobody accused Jeremy of making up the FBI raid. At first, people couldn't get to the documents. As soon as they did, they went, yeah, okay, but it has nothing to do with element 115. George Knapp goes on to say, I've been trying to get it since it happened. Now that it can be proven the raid is true, the argument has shifted to how it's all a cover-up of a murder probe. Nobody that I know has said it was a cover-up of a murder probe. Most people are saying it was a manufactured bullshit plot device used to sell a documentary that wasn't true. The FBI raid had nothing to do with element 115, but the people making money from the story want you to believe that. Okay, it is not a deep, the murder case info was reported immediately. It is not a deep, dark secret. It was not covered up, but we did not have the police report until yesterday. So it's pretty hard to cover up. FYI, I hired a private investigator a few weeks ago to help us obtain any official records related to the raid. Yesterday, my PI informed me that he had spoken to local cops and they agreed to hand over a copy of their highly detailed incident report. Okay. Yeah, my PI also told me yesterday that another investigator from Georgia had obtained the same records. Yeah, so there was a race to get the records, and I lost. I believe that Tim McMillan got the documents, and it might be, I'm not sure if it's a different investigator from Georgia also got the documents before me, several days before me, maybe a week before me, actually. A few hours later, the ex-cop posted his article. Jeremy and I are both glad to see it since it makes it clear the raid was real and not imaginary. Nobody that I know claimed that the raid was imaginary. Everybody that I know claimed that the raid was a plot device and had nothing to do with Area 51 and flying saucers, and that you guys just used the raid to hype up your movie, to make your movie seem like it might be real, right? Yeah, they're after that element 115. Okay. He goes on to say, ask any lawman, homicide detective, or FBI agent you know to read the report and see if it sounds like a routine murder investigation. And I did, and they said, yeah, it doesn't seem anything out of the ordinary here from the documents that we have. Jeremy has reported it accurately. I'm sorry. No, he hasn't reported it accurately. He said they were looking for element 115. He can't prove that, but he said that. I have him dead to rights on another show saying they were looking for the element 115. He believes they were looking for the element 115. Bob Lazar, on the same show, yeah, I believe they were looking for the element 115. George Knapp goes on to say, I happen to share his suspicions. I don't know how many times you have worked on a murder investigation, but I've covered hundreds of them. If you consider this to be routine, then your experiences with homicide probes is far different from mine. Yeah, and that's where we're at, friends. You know, to his credit, at least he answered me, but I think he has a vested financial interest. Remember, I believe that he has a financial stake in Jeremy Corbell's movie. So of course he's going to support this bullshittery because he's going to make more money if they twist the facts of that FBI raid and make it part of the story. And it's not part of the story. And yes, it's a routine thing for the FBI and state police or local police to raid a business together when the murder weapon was purchased through interstate commerce. So friends, yeah, we have covered so much here. The education is fake. The lie detector claims are fake. Lazar's fake science just doesn't work. Ask any scientist. S4 is not there. It doesn't exist. The FBI raid was twisted to sell a documentary and had nothing to do with Bob Lazar's bullshit stories. Bob Lazar himself said gravity waves would be detected, yet they never were by LIGO. And real scientists that I know, that I spoke with at LIGO, looked at his flying saucer designs and said this wouldn't work. We had other examples tonight of why it wouldn't work. Alien scientists said it wouldn't work. Stanton Friedman, people may or may not be aware, but Stanton Friedman and I talked very frequently about this case. And when I first started talking to Stanton Friedman, I was still a believer. In fact, I thought I found a new witness that put Bob Lazar on a Janet airline flying into Area 51. That's on my old channel. That person still might be right. Bob Lazar may have flown into Area 51 on Janet Airlines in order to work on radiation health monitoring equipment. John Lear and others have for a long time stated that Bob Lazar worked on these radiation health monitors around Area 51. Would it be that big of a stretch that he's flown in to work on the radiation health monitors in Area 51? No, it's not a big stretch. That would explain a lot about why he knows anything about Area 51, because he was perhaps a low-level electronics tech in and around Area 51. Now, friends, you know, and here's the next part of this where it gets ridiculous, because I always feel like this is dealing with these fake fraud fairy tale bullshit hucksters. It's like whack-a-mole. You know, every once in a while, Bob Lazar and his supporters will pop back up and say, see, this proves Bob Lazar was telling the truth. They did it in 2003 when element 115 was discovered. See, Bob Lazar, he had to be telling the truth. He predicted element 115 before it even existed. Yes, but the element 115 that was synthesized in a lab bore zero resemblance to the element 115 science fiction fantasy that Bob Lazar described. It has a decay rate in the microseconds. In other words, they synthesize it and then it's gone in the laboratory. They can synthesize it, observe it, and then it decays almost instantly. Bob Lazar's was stable. Now, Bob Lazar also claimed that they did every kind of scientific test they could to that element 115. Well, there's another reason to believe that Bob Lazar is a liar, because if he had actually done every scientific test to this element 115, they would have done some type of isotopic ratio test. They would have known how many isotopes, and Bob Lazar would just be able to tell us how many isotopes do you have to use for this 115 to make it the stable version that he worked with. He can't, and he never will, because he never worked on element 115. It's a fantasy and a fairy tale. If he had done every scientific test on that element 115, they would have known the isotopic ratio of that element. And he'd be able to compare that with the moscovium real element 115, because now he's claimed, well, there's many, you know, hydrogen, for example, has many different forms, and a lot of things depend on the isotopic ratio of different hydrogen, you know, elements. Yeah. There could be a stable form of element 115, and in order to create it, you just need to know how many isotopes, the isotopic ratio. And you said that you worked on this element 115, did every scientific test imaginable to it. You should know the isotopic ratio. You should be able to make this. You should be able to tell real scientists how to make this element 115. You never have, and you never will. And at various times, Bob Lazar has claimed that he had element 115, but then the government stole it away. And then we get 20 years later into the documentary, oh, he starts talking to Jeremy Corbell about the element 115, and suddenly his business gets raided. Folks, for all we know, they filmed that scene after the FBI raid. We don't know. And I don't trust Corbell and him to not do devious things like that to try to sell a story, because Bob Lazar has been profiting from this story for 30 years. That's another great claim. Bob Lazar claims, I don't make any money from this. Why would I do this? Why would I make this up? I'm not doing this for money. Folks, from the very beginning, Bob Lazar has tried to profit from this. He sold the VHS tape that he made with Gene Huff in the back of Science magazines for $29.95 back in the early 90s. You know how I know? My father got every Science magazine. He got tons of Science magazines. He got Omni, Popular Mechanics, Popular Science, Aviation magazines. And he was putting ads in a lot of those Science magazines. And you too, for $29.95, could find out about those flying saucers he worked on at Area 51. He tried to profit in that way. For years, he was selling that videotape. So, and I can't stand this. He never made any money. George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, Bob Lazar. I've heard them all say Bob Lazar doesn't get any money from this. Next, he made a deal with Testors Model Corporation, got paid a huge amount of money for them to create these Testors S4 model, right? Most recently, he did an appearance at, what was it, the 25th or 30th anniversary of the Bob Lazar story. You know, there was a big conference, right? It was held in Europe or maybe Copenhagen somewhere. Anyway, Bob Lazar got a $10,000 speaking fee to do that. And we're all just supposed to believe that he didn't get paid anything from the Jeremy Corbell documentary. I call bullshit on that. Now, I've heard rumors and speculations from some people that, yeah, Bob Lazar didn't get paid from that documentary, but his wife did. I'd like to see the accounting breakdown of that movie, Jeremy Corbell. Prove to us that either Bob Lazar or his wife or anybody didn't get paid any money. Prove it. You can't, and you won't. Most recently, Bob Lazar made I've heard it's a 6 or 7 figure deal with, guess who? Guess who? Who did he make the book deal with? And by the way, we weren't supposed to know that he was making the book deal with one Tom DeLonge from To the Stars Academy. Yeah, Tom DeLonge. He's running a scientific organization, right? But he's going to sell his UFO fairy tale because there's money in it. And recently, friends, we can tell that Bob Lazar got quite a huge payout for that book and the book rights and the publishing of the book, because shortly, some time ago, Bob Lazar moved his home and his business from where he was to a completely new place and $1 million property right after that book came out. Friends, I don't think it's a coincidence that he bought something like $1 million property, right? With multiple, with a home and multiple outbuildings and stuff. I guess he can run his business. And hey, good for him. You cashed out on this fairy tale that you've been selling for 30 years. But don't anybody tell me that Bob Lazar hasn't made any money from this. That's a bullshit statement. People always say that, and it burns me up every time. Bob Lazar, he never made any money from this. Bullshit. He didn't make any money. He's been trying to cash in on this story for years. Oh, that was another thing. They tried to sell the Hollywood screenplay, right? And for years, there was rumors of like, who's going to play Bob Lazar in the movie, right? I heard Charlie Sheen at one point was going to play Bob Lazar in the Bob Lazar Hollywood movie. And friends, there is a Hollywood screenplay written by his buddy, Gene Huff. And a lot of the things that happened in that Hollywood screenplay were somehow also happened in the documentary. Do we think that Jeremy Corbell doesn't have a copy of that screenplay? Of course he does. Of course he does, friends. Now, I got to say that some of the stuff that's coming out, I got way off track, but I'm glad that we could spend a little bit of time on some of these things, because it's hard to, sort of organize, right? Okay. It was Christopher Bales made this. You can search Christopher Bales YouTube. He made this great little piece about Bob Lazar that proves that Bob Lazar is lying. And that's another thing. Oh, his story never changed. His story changes constantly. He can't even remember his story. He can't remember his story. So it changes slightly depending on who's interviewing him, what the questions are like. And look, friends, most recently, again, it's like whack-a-mole. In 2003, when element 115 was discovered, all Bob Lazar supporters, George Knapp, and all these Bob Lazar, all these people were like, see, he must be telling the truth. And here again, we have a New York Times article mentioning off-world craft. And again, I'm not going to cover the New York Times article tonight, but here's what I'll say. First of all, it was castrated. Shortly after they wrote it, Senator Harry Reid said, I didn't say that, and they had to take that part out. They had to change things in the article, make all these retractions because they ran with unproven, untested quotes and sources. So Dr. Eric Davis, who, by the way, is in bed with Hal Puthoff, he works for Hal Puthoff, so there's some connection at TTSA. And why does every New York Times article about UFOs somehow involve either someone from TTSA or someone closely related to TTSA? Again, Dr. Eric Davis works for Hal Puthoff. So Dr. Eric Davis made some mention of briefing people in the government about crash retrievals of craft that were not made on this earth. First of all, other people like Stephen Greer have claimed that they were briefing government people. And then we find out in Stephen Greer's case that the person that he claims to brief is like, that never happened. We don't know if these briefings actually took place. We don't know who he briefed. And getting a briefing doesn't mean it's true. Somebody can brief you in intelligence world. Somebody could brief you about, let's say, a threat of, I don't know, for example, ricin being distributed in the United States. Doesn't mean that's true or it's really going to happen. It just means that they have some information they want to share. But it didn't stop Bob Lazar from making ridiculous. Bob Lazar, you got to up your game, bro, because this shit that you said is ridiculous. We're going to share this here. This is what Bob Lazar says. I can't share the screen. Damn. Okay. Boy, I'm going to have to read this. One second, friends. Yeah, for some reason my share screen is not working. So let me, oh, you know what? Maybe it might be because I have multiple things open. I'm going to close them all down. We'll try this one more time, but I don't want to hang the show. So if it doesn't work, we'll just read what Bob Lazar posted on Instagram. Again, not working. 1 second. We're going to try this one more time. I think I may have eliminated the problem, but now I've lost what I was even looking for. All right, I'm going to find it here, and then I'm just going to read what he posted on Instagram because it's absolutely ridiculous. And again, you know, he just runs with anything that he thinks is going to help sell his fairy tale. And he did this when element 115 was discovered. He pops up again. Like I said, it's like whack-a-mole. It really is like whack-a-mole. You know, you knock him down, you prove with facts and evidence that the guy's a fraud, and he just keeps coming back, you know? Okay. All right, first of all, I'm going to read this tweet from Joe Rogan, too. Imagine sticking your neck out in 1989 and telling an insane story about working on back engineering alien spacecrafts, dealing with ridicule for it for 31 years, only to have the Pentagon come out in 2020 and vindicate. Joe Rogan, are you living in a fantasy land? What article did you read? Because the Pentagon did not vindicate Bob Lazar. One bit. This is totally bullshit. And here's another thing. The source that everybody's going, see, Bob Lazar was right. Bob Lazar was right. Eric Davis called Bob Lazar. That source from the New York Times article talking about flying saucers and briefing people is Dr. Eric Davis. And he has called Bob Lazar a complete and total fraud for years and years. So I couldn't help it. I replied to Joe Rogan. Do you even know that Dr. Eric Davis has called Bob Lazar a complete and total fraud for years and years? You can't have it both ways, Joe. If you believe Eric Davis and the New York Times article, then you'd believe Lazar was a fraud too. No, and look, that's not even very effective, because the truth is that Joe Rogan famously says he doesn't reply to anything on Twitter. He just posts stuff. And I got to say, Mr. Rogan, you have 6.4 million followers. To post a completely inaccurate, factually inaccurate statement like that is ridiculous. And I just can't believe Joe Rogan, because he was the most skeptical person there was. Remember, he had Joe Rogan questions everything. And he basically went at all these UFO people like, this is bullshit, this is bullshit, this is fake, there's no evidence, there's no proof. But somehow he's latched on to this Bob Lazar story and is helping Corbell sell it. Now, this is opinion and speculation, but all of Joe Rogan's comedy specials are on Netflix. Jeremy Corbell's documentary about Bob Lazar is on Netflix. Maybe, just maybe, Joe Rogan is being supportive of a fellow Netflix employee, right? Could be, folks. So Bob Lazar on Instagram, he posts this. Finally, after waiting 30 years, the government admits to possessing alien craft. Time will tell as to what happened next. Personally, I doubt they will disclose much more, and wouldn't be surprised if they issue a correction and say their statement was an error. In any case, I never thought I'd see this day. Thanks so much to all of you that supported me throughout the years. On another note, this is the only social media account I have, no Facebook, Twitter, etc. There are apparently lots of imposters out there. Again, finally, after waiting 30 years, the government admits to possessing alien craft. Bob Lazar, where in the New York Times article did the government admit to possessing alien spacecraft? Joe Rogan, where in the New York Times article did they say that Bob Lazar was telling the truth? These people use anything they can to try to bolster the story, to try to make it believable, to try to prove that this fake fairy tale ever happened, right? Anything that they possibly can. And they twist facts just like they twisted this FBI raid. Now they're twisting the New York Times article. No, friends, no. It had nothing to do with that. And again, you got to pick a side. If you believe Eric Davis is a real and credible source from this New York Times article, he's also the guy who for years has said that Bob Lazar was completely and totally fake. And here, again, irresponsible, stupid people that don't have the facts in hand, they say stupid things, and it drives me crazy. There's a Star article. I'm going to try to share this. I don't know, for some reason I can share browser tabs, but I'm having trouble sharing everything else. Yeah, look at this. I saw this and I couldn't believe it. Evidence suggests UFO whistleblower Bob Lazar was telling the truth all along. Oh, wow. I couldn't believe that they said this. I don't want to read the whole article. Yeah, but basically they're using the New York Times article to say Bob Lazar must have been telling the truth. This gentleman writes, I know the skeptics want to discredit him based on flimsy allegations he falsified his education or previous employment, but did he? Yeah, and this guy's just repeating George Knapp's propaganda about visiting Los Alamos. If he had worked there as a radiation health monitor, he would know his way around. That's not a stretch. Okay. Why do we doubt anything Lazar says about UFOs? In a video authenticated by the Navy this year, a spacecraft is rotating and flying belly up. It's never been proven that it's a spacecraft. That's a factually inaccurate statement in this article. What kind of journalist just says it's a spacecraft? It's not a spacecraft. It's not a proven spacecraft. It could be anything. It could be a drone. It could be anything. It could be an experimental aircraft. If you Google Lazar, you get sucked into a black hole that suggests he is a fraud, liar, conspiracy theorist, and UFO hoaxer. That's because he is. What he was saying in 1989, we have crashed we have recovered crashed alien saucers that defy everything we know about the universe was a stick of dynamite to rational thought. But what he was saying is now backed up by the official record. What official record? Where are they getting this stuff from? They're just connecting dots that don't exist. Oh, geez, friends. Oh, here we go. Here we go. This is the lie repeated over and over again, and we've covered this. Lazar has never once tried to profit from whistleblowing that ruined his career. Listen, you dummy that wrote this article. Rewind. Watch all the ways that Bob Lazar has tried to cash in on this story. Every single chance he got, he tried to cash in on this story. This line is repeated by stupid people because George Knapp says it, because Corbell is always saying it, because Bob Lazar is always saying it. Lazar has never once tried to profit from the whistleblowing that ruined his career. Yes, he has. He tried to profit every chance he got. And it's ridiculous that you didn't do your homework and just wrote that, because now that's out there and people are going to believe that you're correct with this completely factually inaccurate statement. It can be proven that time and time again, Bob Lazar tried to cash in every chance he got on this story. He's not on any lucrative speaking circuits. Okay, you dummy. He just did a speaking engagement a few years ago for the anniversary and got $10,000 for one talk. I'd say that's lucrative, and that's a speaking circuit. Another factual inaccuracy in this article. He's not selling kitschy t-shirts of little green men. No, but he does sell a bunch of crap on his website related to this. He goes about his business in the shadow of infamy and ridicule. I don't know anybody that's ever ridiculed Bob Lazar. That's just this more propaganda. But if, as reported this week, more UFO revelations are forthcoming and they involve new insights on retrieved metamaterials not of this world, isn't it time to set the record straight that our most famous UFO whistleblower? Isn't it time we landed this flying saucer on consensus? Bob Lazar is either a diabolical liar or some kind of hero. I think he's a liar. He can't be both. But what he could be, now more than ever, is an invaluable tour guide into the unknown. And this was written by Vinay Menon, Star's pop culture columnist. And, you know, listen, I got to say that guy did a terrible job. He did no research. He just repeated the propaganda out of the Lazar camp. And I see this in articles time and time and time again. And again, friends, if you're going to believe anything in that New York Times article, the major source that everybody's, you know, getting all excited about because he said something about materials or he briefed somebody about craft not of this earth. First of all, that was his opinion. They provided zero proof in the New York Times article of anything Eric Davis said. But, friends, the major point is that these people are saying Bob Lazar must have been telling the truth, right? Because the New York Times article mentioned recovery of crashed saucers. So Bob Lazar must have been telling the truth. But the guy who was talking about that stuff is Dr. Eric Davis. And Dr. Eric Davis, for years and years and years, has said that Bob Lazar's, oh, let me see. Here's the title of this article. Lazar made up his entire cockamamie story. And this is an article by Joe Murgia, UFO Joe. And this is him quoting Dr. Eric Davis. Lazar made up his entire cockamamie story. Yeah. So this, you're using a source that says Bob Lazar is a fraud for proving that he's not a fraud. You can't do that. That's an intellectual weakling thing to do. Do you think that people aren't going to connect those dots? George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell? Do you think that people aren't going to realize that you're saying Bob Lazar is vindicated? Hey, Joe Rogan, you're saying Bob Lazar is vindicated based on this New York Times article. The guy that you're citing for proof says that Bob Lazar is a complete and total fraud. It's ridiculous. Eric Davis says Lazar isn't worth a documentary film. When Bob Lazar thought he was, and this is George Knapp, when Bob Lazar thought he was going to be taken out, he had this particle accelerator in his house. Again, you can't have a particle accelerator in your house, George Knapp, you dummy. I know you're not a scientist, but go ask a scientist. You're supposed to be a journalist. Go call every physicist that you could find, right? And ask them if you could have a particle accelerator in your house. Why do you keep saying he had a particle accelerator in his house when it's a physical impossibility, George Knapp? You can't have a particle accelerator in your house, George Knapp. All this disinformation, all this misinformation, all this fake information these people put out. I'm sick of it. Okay, so he had a particle accelerator in his house, and he had this container with element 115 in it, right in front of it. And he was ready to flip the switch and say goodbye to Las Vegas. And Art Bell says, oh my God, this is a clip from him being interviewed. Okay, so Eric Davis agrees with me. And by the way, Stanton Friedman agreed with Eric Davis. Here are two actual scientists, physicists, I believe, both Stanton Friedman and Eric Davis. And by the way, alien scientist, has a physics degree and also agrees with this. Nobody can put a particle accelerator in their home unless their house or entire property is dozens of square miles in size. He goes on to talk about the real element 15. Eric Davis says, I gave you the facts. Claims of harassed and threatened people is unsubstantiated hearsay. George is not lying. He just does not know my Roadrunner contacts who live in Las Vegas near Indian Springs and worked at Area 51 and knew Lazar's supervisor. So Eric Davis knows somebody that was Lazar's supervisor, and Eric Davis stated, this is another source that stated Bob Lazar was never a physicist. He was never a scientist. He was an electronics technician that worked for Kirk Meyer, working on radiation health monitoring equipment. And Dr. Eric Davis knew his supervisor. Is Eric Davis a good source? I don't know. But you can't use one source that's saying Bob Lazar is fake to prove that Bob Lazar was telling the truth. That's so disingenuous. That's so fake. But that's what they're doing. And that's what all these believers are trying to do. See, Bob Lazar must have been telling the truth because Eric Davis said that he briefed some government people about crashed alien spacecraft or craft not of this earth. I don't have the article right in front of me. Eric Davis goes on to say, as if Lazar's verifiably false claims deserve a public stage, it is impossible for Lazar to do PhD level work at LANL, that's Los Alamos National Labs, because he only had a high school education with a C average grade. Thus, he would have no education or training to be a scientist. He did not even take high school physics. His job was radiation health monitor, which did not require security clearances. So he did not get access to Area 51 since his workstation was off-site logistics support facility, which is unclassified. He's also a convicted felon in the state of Nevada. In civil society, having been charged and convicted of a felony crime in a court of law by one's peers, that directly impugns one's credibility, truthfulness, and obedience to the law. These three items go to the heart of why people fail to earn security clearances. Lazar never had security clearances to begin with because his EG&G job at the unclassified, physically disconnected Area 51 logistics support facility did not require security clearances. Yeah. So that's where we're at, friends. These people like Joe Rogan, George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, and Bob Lazar are using a source that says he's fake to prove that he's real. And that's what we get here in this so-called community. Now, without any further delay, friends, I think I've covered what I wanted to cover tonight. I'm sorry this ran way long, but this is a lot to plow through. And there's lots more that I could share with you, but I think we're going to call it near a show at this point. I'm going to turn my total attention to the live chat. If you have comments, questions for me, I'm melting down in here. It's like 100. It's like, no, not 100. It's got to be 85 in here. No air conditioning for 2 hours and 21 minutes. I can't run the air conditioner while we're streaming, or you will not hear anything but this air conditioner behind me. So, friends, if you have comments, questions in the live chat, please put them in all. Please put them in all caps. Please recall that I am slightly visually impaired, but things have improved. You can't see it because I can't really flip the thing around. Anyway, I used to have this little laptop screen, laptop size screen, which is really difficult for me to read. I've got a really bigger screen here now, actually a whole new computer. Well, not a new computer. I'm a computer guy. There's no such thing as a new computer to me. There's an old computer that somebody upgraded that I took because they didn't want it, and I upgraded it a little bit. They got a brand new computer. I transferred their data, and I got this. This is a nice like Toshiba all-in-one, and it's got a really nice big screen, and I'm having a lot less trouble reading things. And I think that was a good thing. Okay, so friends, we're going to go to the live chat and take comments, questions, suggestions. Unidentified object. Yes, great show, Stephen. Thank you. Very insightful. Knew some things, but always good to learn more as it's a fascinating case. I love this story. I grew up with this story. I will always love the Bob Lazar story and probably always follow it. Do I believe he's telling the truth? Hell no. I think he just made it up to make some money. Oh, here's another important part. Right before he came out with this story, his house was getting foreclosed on and he was declaring bankruptcy. I don't find that a coincidence. I do not find that a coincidence. And right after he comes out with this story, he's selling UFO videos in the back of science magazines. He's getting paid. That's another thing. He's been paid to be in a lot of documentaries. And he did take, I've heard various reports that he took a speaking fee somewhere and was a no-show and he kept the money. I don't know if that's true or not, but he was paid to be in documentaries. Of course he profited from this story. Carol Utley says, I missed another good show. I will replay later. Yes, Carol, there's a lot to unpack. Yeah, Don Crazeface, that sounds like Corey Good. Yeah, another guy who's done nothing but line his pockets, right, with his bullshit fairy tales. Yeah, they're, you know, great show, Truth Seekers. Great hanging out with you dudes and dudettes, but it's late. Good night. See if we have some other comments or questions. And an unidentified object. I have not seen you here before. Please do like, comment, and subscribe, especially subscribe. We're trying to grow our subscriber base here. Yeah. And here we see Jean-Claude at Beyond Mystic. Hey, welcome back, Jean-Claude. I sent you an email about being on your show. We just have to figure out when to do that. To me, Lazar's story is still very suspect, not vindicated, not debunked, not yet. I have 5 points to share for your consideration. You could try to put them in the live chat there, Claude. I didn't see your 5 points. I just saw that comment a little ways ago. Oh, wait, here we go. Oh, wait a minute, here we go. I'm itching to argue with you, but not to prove Lazar's story. Respectfully, many of your points are non sequiturs. Okay, but you know, got a lot of facts and evidence that would seem to prove that Bob Lazar lies and lies a lot. When you can, you know, nail him down to something factual, it doesn't pan out well for him. When you can get a real scientist to look at his so-called science, it doesn't pan out well for him. Any real scientist looking at his fake physics will tell you this wouldn't work. This can't work. This is science fiction. This is worse than Star Trek. Star Trek is more scientifically accurate than Bob Lazar's flying saucer stories. Yes, and 60 Design chat questions, please use caps. That lets me know that the comment is for me. Ryan Murphy Richards, if aliens are telepathic, what happened to freedom of thought? Yeah, I don't know. A lot of people claim they're telepathic, but we don't, you know, I don't know that there's evidence of that. Telepathy is an invasion into the freedom of thought. Jean-Claude at Beyond Mystic says, yes, I agree. He lies a lot. Don Crazeface, do you know where Lazar's new property is in general? You know, on my other workstation, I have even pictures of his new property, and I believe a real estate listing showing that it was quite an expensive investment by Mr. Lazar recently. Don't recall offhand. It's somewhere in the Midwest. I can get that information to you, Don Crazeface, as soon as I locate it. Okay, Jean-Claude, please consider for a moment the other real peer-reviewed scientists not agreeing with Lazar's science is not proof. Well, Jean-Claude at Beyond Mystic, with respect, here's what I would like you to do. Go take the Bob Lazar material about how the flying saucer works and show it to any physicist. Ask them to look at it and tell you if it's plausible or it's totally science fiction. I've done that with many different physicists. Stanton Friedman and I talked about this, and I know Stanton Friedman was no fan of Bob Lazar, but he was a real physicist. He worked on nuclear rockets. He was a real physicist. He says, you heard him in these clips earlier, maybe you weren't here yet, but in one clip he says, Bob's Element 115 scheme. Sounds great, won't work. Science fiction. We have Jeremy Rise has a physics degree, also believes that the science wouldn't work. It can't work. It would negate all the laws of physics that we know of. It would negate Einstein's theory of relativity. It would totally be a new form of physics that we have never discovered. Do I believe that Bob Lazar is that smart? No. No, I don't. Real scientists funded by academia are paid to maintain a narrative of the fake science. I get your point, but this is like having Anderson Cooper on CNN. Hold on, friends. Okay. Hello, this is Steven. You're on Truthseekers. Oh, geez. Again, Bob Lazar. Why do you keep bothering me, Bob Lazar?
Listen, I'm thinking our lives. I told the truth about everything and everyone.
And again, I don't think so. I don't think so, Bob Lazar.
Wow, I think you're wrong. I think element 115 or 116 or whatever I said it was is coming true on disclosures here, and I'm sorry to break the news to you that this is how it ends, but this is it.
You know what, Bob Lazar? You sound a lot like David Wilcock, who called in the other night.
No. This is a totally different guy that called in the other night.
Yeah, that was a totally different guy. Yeah.
I'm from Michigan. I have a nuclear like business or something like that. And David Wilcock, I don't believe that guy. I mean, no one. That's total nonsense. But what I say is true.
Yeah. So.
I listen to you, Mr. Camion. Are you listening to me?
Yeah, I'm listening to you. Go ahead.
All right, you listen to me. You can try to prevent the disclosure narrative from falling over, but I'll tell you what, it's going to happen without you, okay? You can be on board, you can make a little money, you can get a little famous if you want, or you can go bye-bye.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll sign up. I'll start selling fairy tales or like Element 115 samples.
No, Ranger is wrong. This is not Brandon Young. This is Bob Lazar. I will give you some element 115, and it's hidden in a big black dildo. I will say that much. And all right, have a great show. Goodbye.
All right, thanks, Bob Lazar. Yeah, I don't know who that is, but somebody keeps calling in claiming to be the people that I'm beating up on, and it's funny. I thought it was somebody completely different. I didn't think it was Brandon Young or anybody. I still don't know who this person is. Yeah, Gutter Gawker, don't sell out, please. This is a good show now. Thank you, Gutter Gawker, and I don't know that I've seen you here in the live chat before. Please subscribe. Like, comment, and subscribe. There's a reason everybody says that stuff. We really need to get to subscription-based stuff. Victor Calirio. Stephen, I sent you a Facebook message via a talk I had with Zincom Fairchild employee. Great, Victor Calirio. We'll see if we can't find that. Okay, Victor Calirio. Victor Clario sent me a message and he says, I spoke to Peter G., who claims to have worked with Lazar at Zincom Fairchild in 1981. He told me he also had contact with you, I think. He simply said, that UFO guy that wears dark glasses all the time, I'm guessing that's you. Yes, anyway, that probably was me. Yes, I talked to Peter G. once or twice or several times. Anyway, I had a 30-minute interview with him last night. I would really like to hear that. Anyway, just wondering if it was you and also had contact with him. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. And I see your friend request, and I'm going to confirm your friend request. And somebody mentioned that Sarah Adams and somebody in the live chat mentioned that Sarah Adams and Taj shared the first video that supported her having superpowers, and neither of them shared the second video. Oh, here it is, KB. Neither of them shared the second video that wasn't in their favor. No, they didn't. And there's more to come on Sarah Adams and some surprising, shocking twists to the strange case of Sarah Adams, which we will, honestly, I want to wrap it up, but I've been waiting because I think she was on vacation or something, friends, was going on. And yeah, I've gotten sidetracked with other stories. Carol Utley, he has had in the About section of his channel. I sent him another donation tonight on PayPal, but he's not see it. Reamsey, hold on. Reamsey, hold on. I'm so sorry. I forgot. Folks, I got a little busy and I totally forgot to check with the PayPal donations. Yes, there is a PayPal donation in the About. You can go to the About, or if you just go to the main channel, there's two buttons there. One is to become a supporter on Patreon. You give me $1 a month. We don't have tiers or anything like that. It's all just $1 a month. And if you, I don't want to sign in with Google. If you donate, I will read your okay, let me see. Yes. I'm finding the donation here from Reamsey. And let me see, Reamsey, did you include? No, you did not. Your note is, here is some money. And God bless you for your kind $10 donation. I'm sorry, but I'm having a lot of trouble to put the thing on the screen, so I'm going to do it on the next show. I think I need to reboot the computer. So this is what I'm going to say, Reamsey. God bless you for your kindness and your generosity and your support of our show. Every dollar people give me helps. Oh, that reminds me. Yes, 669 says Steve has links in the About section. Yes, I do. And you just click on this PayPal thing and send a one-time donation if you want. That's how I do it. Yes. And listen, I'm a little hesitant to try this, but I am going to try it. One of the things that we're working on is a multi-camera setup. And we've got 3 right now, but I can't use one of them. I can't use one of the cameras because it's just, I didn't have anything to mount it on, and it's just kind of sitting here for testing purposes. But we have a multiple camera setup that's going to be in action as soon as I get something to put these other webcams on. But I'll see if I can't show you. There is a, yeah, here, let's see. Wow, that's a little darker, but a little closer. And that's another thing. One of these webcams is the built-in. So I have to, wow, that's trippy, right? If I want it to be trippy, I can use this one, this camera. This is the built-in web camera. And then there is another webcam that we got courtesy of the donations. And that was really from Reamsey's past donation. I think it was $40. So the PayPal donations so far have been, like $50. And I spent 40 of it on another webcam. And yeah, this is grisly. It is. It's kind of, yeah, it's kind of trippy. Well, it's a built-in webcam that I'm using right now, but just to show the multi-camera feature. So we're gonna be switching to multi-camera setup real soon, and that again is courtesy of you kind people. Yeah, that one looks much better. This is the good Logitech main camera that we're going to use. But interestingly, I read like 1,000 reviews of cheaper webcams, and I found this one for $40. And I even have a friend that's using it, and he's like, buy it. It's every bit as good as that expensive Logitech that you bought, that you're using now. In fact, it's even better in low light conditions. And I tested it, and I got to tell you, it's great. It looks great. And I'm not going to show it tonight because, like I said, it's going to show my background all messed up, and I don't have it in a situation where, well, actually, maybe I do. I'll just try to hold it. But I just want to show you that we're getting this multi-camera setup going. Let's see here. See if this is going to work. Whoa, trippy. yeah, so here is another webcam that we have, which looks pretty good. And we've got the built-in in the new workstation that we're using here, which, yeah, it's a little trippy, but you know, maybe if I have a light here that I can compensate. This camera does not work well in low light conditions, so I think when we use the built-in, I'll have an additional light I'll put on so that it doesn't look quite so dark and grainy. And this is the Logitech main. So friends, your donations are powering this show to continue to improve and move on. I'm getting to the point now where we're going to have a multi-camera setup. And if somebody does make another donation, please let me know. So far, we've had Reemsey with a kind, generous $10 donation. God bless you. I truly appreciate it because every dollar helps. We need another $40 to get another one of these. This is just this little webcam it's really good, high quality HD webcam for $40. So we want to get another one, and then we're going to have sort of multi-camera angles that we can cut to make things a little more produced and interesting. And I just like the idea of having a multi-camera setup. It's pretty easy, except you see that it goes black. So I think what we're going to do is, like, when I play a video, I'll drop out. Like, I could drop out of the stream like this. And oh, that was I didn't mean for it to take that long. But then I can drop back into the stream at a different camera angle, a different camera. You know, these are the things that we're working on. And again, all of this, everything here, the all the webcams, the microphones, everything was paid for with the kind support of the Patreon people and the people that are clicking that donate button. So I don't know what to tell you except that you have my promise that I'm not like you know, misusing those little bit of funds that we have coming in. It's all being funneled directly back into the show. I also bought another backdrop for $20 that we're going to be using at the cabin, which is like a space scene and some other stuff. Sixes Design says it's so worth it to buy any and all cameras that have low light functionality. It's totally worth the extra few bucks for them. Yeah, and I'll send you the link if you want, Sixes Design. I'm sending this link to this camera that I just got to everybody because it is really good, high quality, even in low light conditions. Better, it does low light better than the Logitech, which was 140 or 130 bucks, which I was surprised for. You know, such a big price difference, but you never know what you're going to get, so you have to follow the reviews. Okay. Dead air. Yeah, dead air. Let's see. Make sure, yeah, the audio, okay. When somebody says dead air, that was because I was just messing around, flipping the cameras around, guys. Yeah, sorry. Boy, is it like incredibly hot here, so yeah, when you drop out, we cannot hear you. Yeah, it mutes the mic when you drop out. But if I remove myself from this stream, but as soon as I put myself back in the stream, the mic is back. That's just the way the software works. Ryan Morphy Richards, can I pay to talk to Reemsey? I think you're going to have to negotiate that with her. Yeah. Okay. Gutter Gawker runs a show and wants you as a guest. Ask, will you sub to his channel, please? Yeah, Gutter Gawker. Oh, wait a minute. Let me, hold on, friends. I have to go to the actual Facebook live chat to make him a moderator. Okay, 1 second. Let me get to my profile and let me get to my channel. Okay, friends. So 1 second. I have to get to the live chat and make Gutter Gawker a moderator. And Gutter Gawker, you can feel free to post your. Trying to find you here now. Gutter Gawker, say something so I don't have to go 50 miles back. Okay, Gutter Gawker. I'm trying to find Gutter Gawker here so that we can make him a moderator. If somebody else in the live chat knows Gutter Gawker's YouTube channel, please post the link to his YouTube channel in the live chat. So yeah, I would be happy, Gutter Gawker, to trade you and go subscribe to your channel. Oh, there we go. Gutter Gawker, you are now a moderator. Use your powers wisely. You can now post your link in the live chat, and then I would be happy to go and subscribe to your channel. Gutter Gawker says hi. Yeah, so post the Gutter Gawker, post the link to your live chat, or post a link to your YouTube channel, and we would be happy to trade you sub for sub. Gutter Gawker, I'm a tool. Oh, Gutter Gawker's channel is right here. All right, good. There's his YouTube channel. Let me see if I can find that. Gutter Gawker YouTube channel. Here we go, Gutter Gawker. I'm going to your channel right now. Oh, and it's about UFOs. Yeah, you got my sub, Gutter Gawker. There we are. I am now subscribed to your channel. I hope you will return the kindness and subscribe to mine as well. Jean-Claude, again, I was itching to argue with you to further prove your point, Stephen. Not to support Lazar. Love you, man. Great show. Can't wait to do a live stream with you. Yeah, well, I told you, pick a subject. There's just one thing that I thought wasn't a good idea to talk about, and you know why. I sent you a message. Everything else is fair game, and I'd be happy to do it. I watched a few of your streams. I've been trying to catch up with some old friends that do streaming, and I didn't get a lot. I didn't do a lot of watching of yours, but I have it on my list of things to do. Generally, I try to catch up on these things when I do the drive to the cabin, because I've got 2.5 hours to catch up with friends and things like that. Oh, wait a minute. Brandon Young, you can visit me whenever you want. I will feed you good food and take you to the art museum. That sounds like a fun time. Gutter Gawker, I shared your show last live. Please watch. Yeah, I'm gonna take a look at your latest few videos as soon as I'm done streaming here. And friends, listen, it is incredibly hot here, like terribly hot here. Oh, there's one last point that I wanted to make on the Bob Lazar case. We were talking about the element 115. I looked all over for it and I can't find it, but somebody's got to know which one it is, because George, if you've got to go through George Knapp lectures, friends, it's going to take a while. You're going to be listening to George Knapp lectures for hours and hours and hours to find one little piece of information, and that's kind of the hell that I live with sometimes. So today I spent hours and hours and hours listening to George Knapp stuff. There's one lecture where George Knapp straight says, I know Bob showed me where some of the 115 was buried, and someday I'm going to go bury it up. Bullshit. Bullshit. You've had the absolute positive proof all these years. You know, you could go dig up the element 115 and throw it down on the table and say, there's your proof, bitches. And you haven't in 30 years. You know where it's buried and you haven't gone and gotten it in 30 years. Bullshit, George Knapp. I call bullshit on your claims of knowing where the element 115 is buried and one day you're going to dig it up. What day is that? Haven't you milked this story enough for 30 years? Right? If you had the absolute honest to God proof that Bob Lazar is telling the truth all this time for 30 years and you never did anything with it, I think that makes you an idiot. But this is just more exaggerated, bolsterous claims from the guy who probably profited more than Bob Lazar. He's been selling this fairy tale for 30 years, friends. Jean-Claude says, good night. Got to go to bed. Good show. Stephen lost 10K in his sweat, 10 kilograms in his sweat lodge. Awesome show, Stephen. Yeah, I can't wait. I got one more month of this. And yo, you know what? I put in a bigger air conditioner in the window behind me, and it helped a little bit. But when it's 90 or 100 degrees outside all day, this room is just a sauna. It's crazy. Corbell has nothing without Knapp. Yeah, those two are, you know, peas in a pod. They're always hanging out together and figuring out. Who said subs for subs? Get your content, man. What? I did say subs for subs. Here's the deal, Ryan Morphy Richards. I don't know many other people that run shows. And so sort of, when another show host comes into my live chat, I want to be respectful of them and their show. And yeah, I will trade sub for sub. And then I generally go check out those shows because I'm looking for, I'd like to have some friends that create shows so that I can bounce some ideas off of them, see how they do things. Maybe they do things better or differently than me. So yeah, I am subbing to other people's channels, sure. Yeah, you earn subs. Well, I think I am. I'm doing the best that I can. I'm doing the best that I can here. Everyone's a critic. Oh, and by the way, somebody said something nasty on Twitter about me conning people in the community or something with absolutely no proof. And then I, said, "Where's the proof? What are you talking about?" And nothing, crickets. And again, I get it. People get upset when I destroy their delusions with facts and evidence. They get pissed off at me and start saying all kinds of shit. Good. Here's the deal. If you want to debate me on the facts and the evidence, that's fine. But when you just start throwing out ad hominem attacks or calling me, making up shit about me personally that has nothing to do with the facts and evidence, I have a problem with that. Let's stick to we can have a respectful debate on the facts and evidence. It's ridiculous. Brendan Young, did you get my donation? Let me check here. Stay logged in. Let me check here. Brendan Young with a kind, listen, Brendan Young, I'm really sorry. To you and Reemsy, I'm going to make a nice graphic, and on the next show, I will put real big up on the screen your kind donation of $5. And let me see if you included a note for me to read in that. No, it just says sent by Brendan Young. And Brendan Young, I want to thank you for being a kind supporter and really helping me to move the show forward. Every dollar, friends, is getting put back into the show. And oh, by the way, I have some good news. We have StreamYard just expanded a little bit. They're giving you a little more for your money. So now we're already streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube. I can add one more destination now. I haven't decided. If anybody has any suggestions in the live chat, please chime in. Should we do BitChute? Should we do Twitch? Where else should we spread the show to? And Brendan Young, yes, I did get your kind $5 donation. I'm having trouble share screening. What we usually do is we put the donation and a big thank you up on the screen. So please accept my apologies. I will do that for you and Reemsy on tomorrow's show. I think there's some issue that is going to cause me to have to reboot before this share screen thing's going to work right. I can only share, right now, I can only share browser tabs for some reason. But thank you very much. I think you were here earlier when we were talking about we're going to a multi-camera setup. I'm also purchasing a new microphone just so that when people like Jason Quick come here with a really expensive microphone, my microphones won't sound so shitty compared to his. So we're going to upgrade the microphone. We're going to a multi-camera setup. And then if we can expand the Patreon money just a little bit, I'm going to upgrade to the professional, the best version of StreamYard. I think it's going to be another $20 a month, but then we can have, I believe, up to 12 destinations, friends. We could be streaming this show to 12 different places, and I'd really like to do that. One of the things, too, I wanted to mention is that Out of Mind clued me in. Thanks. Shout out to Out of Mind. Out of Mind's website, she posts my shows, and you can see the number of people that viewed it on her website, and those views don't show up at all on YouTube. So it's really frustrating to me that I guess because they're from an external site, I don't know why, but the videos play on Out of Mind's site. You can see, okay, 181 views, but they don't register in YouTube views because of the crappy way YouTube counts everything, so they don't have to pay advertising dollars, I guess. And yes, like I was saying, I'm sorry, Brandon Young, I did get your kind donation. I appreciate it immensely. Reemsy is telling me to buy an Arctic Air personal cooler. Yeah, I will look into that. I'm willing to do anything because I can't not work. I have to work. Keltruth77. I watched a very disturbing documentary about the death of Sarah Adams' boyfriend today. Yeah, it's really sad what happened to him, and I'm sad. I'm sad that that happened to him. You know, just anytime somebody that young dies, it's very sad. Oh, and Sixers Design was another great find. Text dialogue, interview with Bob Lazar, Jeremy Corbell, and George Knapp regarding element 115. Yeah, that is, I've seen that, and is a really great resource. So if anybody wants to dig deeper, also in the description box below, friends, you can go old school with my original show, The Midnight Hour. It was an audio radio show podcast. It aired on the Fringe FM on Saturday night at midnight. There is a previous show I did on Bob Lazar called Bob Lazar Bombshells, but really everything that we covered in that. But if you want some background and see, you know, my previous take on some of the same information, I think there may be more in that than we presented tonight. You can go and listen to that as well. Ramsey is talking about these air conditioners. I got to check that air conditioner out. I'd love to phone in for a rate, but I don't know how it would work. Yeah, I didn't even open the phone lines today. People are using that number. I didn't open the phone lines because we're using the internal mic on the webcam, and I was afraid that people won't be able to see it. Yes, Cal Truth says, yes, Stephen, you are definitely destroying my fairy tale fantasies, but I really appreciate it. It's a weird juxtaposition. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's not my intention to destroy anybody's beliefs, but to find the truth behind these stories. I think most of us here, we want to believe, but yeah, Keltruth, right on cue, Keltruth, I just want to believe. You can't, I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to try to look, I hope this room is not too messy. Yeah, it's pretty messy. I want to believe. Yeah, I got the poster, Keltruth. Yeah, sorry about the mess. So, this is the one room of the house that my wife refuses to clean, which leaves it to me, which means it's always going to be a mess. Yeah, I brought the poster, Keltruth. I'm just like Fox Mulder and everybody else that wants to believe. I want to believe. Carol Utley says, sorry, I'm not on Twitter, Facebook, but I hear I am on YouTube. Whoa, way behind. Oh, you guys are talking about the air conditioner. I got to look up this air conditioner. So everybody seems real, Wave good night, everybody. Have a good evening, morning. Thanks, Stephen, for the insights. Thanks for the interesting chat, knowledge, people, and good links. Bye-bye. Good night. And hi, the pigeon lady. Okay. Ryan, do you like cheeseburgers? Yeah, man. Everybody likes cheeseburgers are awesome. Steve, you do really well with this stuff. I think I speak for everyone. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the support you guys are giving me. It's making me want to work harder at this. And really, I think the focus going forward is going to be to really just hit the ground. Now that we've got a stable platform and a show format that seems to be working, I'm just going to tweak some things on the technical side so that we get a little better production value, I suppose, right? Okay. I think it's fine to believe things that are not true as long as you know what you believe is false. Yeah, it could be. Wanting to believe makes the Wilcox Goods, etc. of the world. It's a good thing to want to. Yeah, it's a good thing to want to. I really think I would love to live in a world where this Bob Lazar story is true. I just don't. I don't live in that world. It would be a more interesting world. It would be a more fascinating world. It's just like, what if comic book superheroes were real? Wouldn't that be an amazing world to live in? I think so. It's the same deal with this alien UFO stuff. It would be so amazing if this stuff were true. That it just makes you want to believe it more, I guess. It's amazing. It's amazing. Let's see here. Oh, no, there we go. There we go. getting out of frame. I had to show my messy room there. So yeah, I got the poster, friends. Well, friends, I didn't realize it, but we're coming up on 3 hours here, which is going to make this the longest show that we've ever done. And by the way, I want to thank everybody for the support on the Richard Dolan show. Some people emailed me some really nasty, really mean. There was a lot of people pissed off at me. But again, they didn't attack the evidence we presented. They attacked me personally, which is a sure sign that what I presented was true and factual. If they can't even debate the evidence and instead have to personally attack me, it's because they can't debate the evidence. And they know that what I said was true. So it is what it is. Ryan, do you have a PayPay? I think you mean a PayPal. Yes, Ryan Morphy Richards. I have a PayPal. If you go to the main channel, there's some buttons up on the screen, and let me see. I'm going to show everybody just so we can. Yeah, I'll show you where the PayPal links are. There. Yeah, so if you go right to the Truthseekers website or the Truthseekers main channel here, there's a couple of donate buttons here. One of them is to donate by PayPal, and one of them is to donate by Patreon. Patreon is $1 a month. I just gave the Patreon supporters this really cool backstage look into a computer that I'm going to be developing, which I'm really excited about. The people on Patreon get sort of a backstage view of whatever I'm working on. They get to hear about it, see it before it actually happens. And here's the PayPal. It's one-time donation by PayPal. That is what you can do to support the show financially. And I truly appreciate anybody that does that, because we are moving forward with the show, and really, like, those few dollars is all we really need to keep moving the show forward. Also, if you go to the About page, you will see donate by PayPal, donate on Patreon, and that'll take you right to the link where you can give me a couple of bucks. It's much appreciated and supported. We are viewer supported entirely 100% here, but this truly is a labor of love. I believe our total monthly income from Patreon is like $50 or something like that. Out of mind. Yes, hard business. The Pigeon Lady. I don't believe that I've seen you here before, Pigeon Lady. She says, I used to sell pleasure instruments. Yes, and Sixes Design, thank you for reminding everyone. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe. Thank you all for coming. Yes, friends, we're going on 3 hours here. I'm really sorry that there was not more time for the live chat tonight. I probably should have tried to cut this up into parts 1 and 2. Who knows? We might do part 2 sometime in the future on Bob Lazar. It depends. But my friends, it's been an interesting night. I'm sorry. Nothing can always go the way that I want. And I kept going. I got to get to the live chat. It took hours to get through. It took a long time to get through all this stuff, because there are so many examples that Bob Lazar is a liar, that George Knapp is a liar, right? And a profiteering so-called journalist selling a fake story for 30 years. That's his claim to fame. And Jeremy Corbell, there's so much proof that that guy's a liar. I don't know what to say, friends. I do not know what to say. Yeah, so, friends, it's been a long, long day for me here. Trying to find here. Yeah, I'm trying to find here the bumper to play us out. So, friends, until next time, first, I really want to thank each and every one of you for coming here. I want to thank all of you guys who have been retweeting. I notice a lot of people if I post a show now, people are retweeting it a lot more than they used to. And we really need your support to continue to grow our show. And I'm really thankful to each and every one of you who are liking, commenting, and subscribing. And again, another way you can support me is if you know a friend that's into this kind of content, please email them, copy and paste the show address or one of the videos and say, hey, you should subscribe to this show. You would probably enjoy it. That, my friends, more than anything, is the kind of help that I truly appreciate that we need right now. So, friends, what can I say about the Bob Lazar case? I started following it in 1989, and here we are in 2020, and people are still interested in the story. It's a fascinating and amazing story. But is it true? Hell no. I don't think so. But it's fun to imagine a world like Bob Lazar described, right? It's so much fun to imagine this rogue scientist working on flying saucers and being a whistleblower and telling us the truth and confirming everything we already thought we knew, that the government has been lying to us and covering up aliens, and they've got proof, but won't give it to us. Friends, I don't know what to tell you about this story, except that even though it's fake, I still love it. I still follow it, and I probably always will. It's just the story that got me started down so many of these different rabbit holes. And like I said at the beginning of this broadcast, I was a science nerd like Bob Lazar. You know, I didn't build rocket cars, but I was building model rockets and computers and weird stuff and chemistry, blowing stuff up. I once got in a lot of trouble with my parents, blowing up something in the basement. So, but, you know, he's kind of like a kindred spirit. I was the same kind of science nerd growing up. I always loved the story. But is it true? No, I don't think so. Anyway, friends, I should be back tomorrow night with another show. I hope you will join us tomorrow night at 10 p.m. as well. And again, everything is tentative. Things happen, things change. So, friends, let me just get back to that. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. I sincerely appreciate your help in spreading the word about our little show here that is suddenly becoming a bigger show. And I'm happy about that. I am so pleased with our progress. I said I'm trying not to look at the numbers for a while and I'm going to keep my head down and keep plowing through, keep producing good shows and hope for the best. That's all I can do. And I'm thankful that all of you get to be a part of it too. Until next time, friends, I'm Stephen Cambion. Good night.